Events begin in the training palace of the Frederick Empire Palace. The knights fight among themselves, and one of them claims that today's training is much more difficult. After which he asks if the newcomer is okay. The guy asks what he said, and then says yes. Another knight claims that Commander Pesteros may have few lines, but his talent is undeniable, and therefore if the guy serves under his command, he will reach heights. But the young man still doesn't think that this can be called ordinary severity. The young man understands that if he does not escape before he realizes the whole threat, he will simply plunge into eternal sleep. The guy thinks why there are so many rumors around the Duke, but understands that he is a transcendental madman. The Frederick Empire has been ruled by the imperial family for centuries. In ancient times, she received the blessing of the dragon, and since then in every generation in one of the 4 ruling ducal families of the empire. A child was born blessed by magic from above, and the child who was gifted with magic was called a transcendent. Their intelligence and physical abilities are far superior to those of humans. However, even they have a weakness, and the more often they use magic awakening, the more their soul becomes distorted and they eventually turn into a berserker. Once this happens, chaos ensues and no ordinary person can stop them. Therefore, everyone can only wait for the rest of the transcendents to come to their aid. And now, the greatest among them in this country is Emperor Alexander Duncan Mikhailio, and he is the only one who is able to stop them. The guy who fights with the young man with silver hair thinks that there is no way he can resist him. And at this time, his opponent is already approaching his face, and the guy thinks that he has swallowed him whole. But suddenly someone screams out what the brother is doing. It turns out to be a girl with silver hair. She then grabs her brother and says that she did speak, and also asks how many times she asked him to be more careful, but she even lost count. The guy then, looking at the girl, calms down and apologizes to Dahlia, and the knight watches all this in shock. The girl thinks that her name in this world is Dahlia Pesteros, and she is the younger sister of the most terrible of the transcendents. Well, she does not belong to this world at all. And one day, the young lady realized that she was living in the world of a dating simulator that she played in a past life. The young lady sees the emperor standing in front of her with a bouquet of flowers. He apologizes for being late, but asks the girl to accept the safe bouquet in which he put his soul. The main character thanks Togo and says that she will manage, but she herself thinks that she is madly adored by the transcendents. After the main character refuses, the guy leaves dejectedly and thinks that it seems that today is not his day. And the girl thinks that instead of working, His Majesty is simply walking around doing nothing. But someone else comes up to her and says that he thinks it's time for Dahlia to voice her decision. The main character asks what and other decisions are being discussed, and the guy just leans towards her. The main character thinks that this head of one of the 4 ruling ducal families of the empire is Frederick, Duke of Meldon Artis, Transcendental. The young man is a little embarrassed and wants to say something, but suddenly someone pushes him away. This is another guy, he asks, who is more worthy than him to go to the ball with Lady Dahlia. This is the head of one of the 4 ruling ducal families of the empire, and Frederick, Duke of Louvain-Beaufort, and of course, he is a transcendent. The young lady claims that she does not intend to go there with either of them. And the brunette claims that he doesn't like it, and asks if the girl really wants to go with Sir Cedric again. Cedric is the 2nd prince of the empire, transcendent, who was chosen as the heir of the imperial couple. But the young lady replies that she is not, and the young man then asks who she will go with. And the girl just sighs and then just says that this time she promised to go to the ball with Adelesia. Then 2 guys ask what she is talking about. But suddenly they hear the sound of heels and turn around, but they don't have time to do this, as the girl with black hair already hugs the young lady and then claims that Dahlia promised her this time. And she doesn't need anyone else. This is the main character of the game Ouroboros Labyrinth, which she played in a past life. And this girl's name is Adelicia Bentiez. The original plot was very tragic, and that's it. Adelicia was the one whom the mad transcendents fell in love with, but current events are fundamentally different from the plot of the original somehow. Dahlia has taken her place, and the young lady wonders how things turned out this way. The main character, sitting on the sofa, thinks that she began to remember her past life 2 weeks after she turned 13. The nanny then turns to the young lady and asks if she should bring her a cup of tea and also says what, but the girl is just busy. The main character agrees and says that of course she also wants to eat the cookies that the girl recently gave her, and also let Darlene eats with her. The nanny then screams whether she should do it again. after which she claims that perhaps the girl is the only lady who prefers to drink tea with sweets with the servants, and the main character thinks that in the end, just a couple of weeks ago, all her memories returned to her, and the main character was so shocked by this that she could not even swallow her tea. The young lady found herself in the world of this game, which she played in a past life. The name of this game was Ouroboros Labyrinth, but how many handsome men there were not in it. Or no matter what choice the player made, complete madness awaited him. After all, this is a tragic game with a rating of 19+ that does not allow players to even dream of a chance. The main character thinks that she has no idea how soon her character will fall into eternal sleep, and the nanny then says, "Madam, that you can't act like a fool right after eating." The young lady thinks that in all her 13 years of life she has never met her brother. Hikana Presteros, and of the many characters in the game, he was the craziest villain, because his bloodthirstiness is so great that even his relatives would interfere with the guy. He would undoubtedly destroy them. Now the young lady thinks what a relief it is that in the original, he was the only child of the Duke. And the nanny says that since the lady has eaten so much, she simply has to take a walk. The main character then, with tears in her eyes, thinks why exactly she turned out to be his younger sister, who was not even in the original. In the game, Hikan is the only heir of the Duke of Pesteros. However, somehow a young lady appeared in this story, and in other words, she is a hidden character from the original story who was suddenly added like that into the labyrinth of Ouroboros, but the girl still thinks why she got the role of the villain's younger sister. While on the street, the nanny tells her mistress how wonderful the weather is, and the girl thinks that at the end of the game, her brother has completely gone crazy, and the duchy was destroyed by the emperor, and also, none of the roots is able to change his fate. Therefore, the girl thinks that it means that she, as a younger sister, will have the opportunity to exchange good boys with him on the chopping block. But still, she is lucky that Haikon turned 16. This means that he has just begun to fall into madness, and since his first magical awakening will occur at the age of 18, then the young lady still has time to fix everything, and the girl thinks about a magical awakening. This is an ability described in the Labyrinth of Ouroboros, which is based on a very cruel and sad story. If you use too much power, the owner will lose control over it and turn into a berserker, so there is absolutely no way to maintain sanity at the same time. When the male characters went crazy, they fought tooth and nail to get the female lead. Of course, the girl would prefer to be born in a calmer world, but the only distortion in the plot is her existence. The young lady invites her nanny to decorate her room with flowers, and the woman says that her room already looks like a flower garden. The young lady still thinks that she has not met her brother, and therefore does not know for sure. But it is possible that, having met his charming little sister, he will decide to live a more peaceful life. But the young lady, looking in the mirror, thinks that she has a rather cute face. After which he smiles and says the word brother, but then the young lady despairs, and she understands that this is hardly possible, but then the girl turns on her back, and she thinks that anyway, they told her that her brother is now living with their relatives, so the girls are wondering what he is doing. The main character wonders if they are really destined to live separately for the rest of their lives. After all, at least she thought so, but now standing in front of her older brother, the lady with silver hair wonders how it all came to this. After all, 5 minutes ago she was sitting in her room eating delicious food, and thinking that when she eats them, it seems to her as if she can solve any problem. However, suddenly she heard a slightly unfamiliar voice and wondered if someone had come there and then went to the door. But when the girl came closer, she heard someone shouting that the young master could not break in there at will. And at the same moment, the elder brother of the main character entered the room. The same Hikan Pesteros, therefore, the girl understood that the decisive moment had come. The maid was also a little puzzled by the appearance of the gentleman, and then there was a little silence. The young lady wondered where this energy came from because she felt like she was going to throw up. Looking at the young man, the main character wondered if he was really 16, because why was he such a thug then? The nanny then told the guy that the lady was not ready yet, but the young man then turned to Dahlia, and he said that their father fell into eternal sleep. The girl is silent and doesn't understand why she doesn't feel anything, and this must be because memories from a past life return to her. Therefore, the young lady thinks about whether she should cry for the sake of decency. The girl understands that, to begin with, her mother died almost immediately after giving birth. But father was always too busy, so he was almost never at the estate. Therefore, the young lady wonders if Hikan succumbed to madness so quickly due to a lack of parental love. She had similar thoughts while she was still playing the game. But now, seeing her brother's cold gaze, the young lady thinks that for a second she went into herself and lost her vigilance. But suddenly the realization comes to her that right now, Hikan is trying to understand her value and where and how he will be able to use the child, who bears the surname Pesteros. But the main character thinks that it was not worth expecting sympathy from such a cold person, and the guy at this time says that the girl is not crying. And the main character, in response to this, just waves her head and then thinks that it's worth thinking about. After all, she is now living in the youth of the most ruthless character in the original game. Before their meeting, she thought a lot about the fact that in all game routes he would inevitably plunge into eternal sleep, because this is how he meets his sad end. But the young lady thinks why she should plunge into eternal sleep with him, and she would like to blurt out all this to him and leave the estate with her head held high. But she doubts that something like this will solve anything, because she is just a little girl. And since their father had fallen into eternal sleep, the only thing she could do was convince Hikan that she posed absolutely no threat to him. Therefore, the young lady decides to play her trump card, and this is the role of an innocent and stupid little sister who doesn't know anything. And then Hikan will think that she is absolutely harmless and then will forget about her. Therefore, the main character thinks that she will only have to wait for the opportunity to leave this place and wonders what her brother will think about his little and stupid sister. And then, when the guy turns around to leave, the girl realizes that this is her moment, and he hands his brother the bitten croissant. The guy just turns around and looks at her silently. Then he asks what it is, and the little girl claims that she just wanted her brother to cheer up a little, after which he asks if his brother is okay and says that he is probably sad because his father left them. The young lady thinks that in one of the novels she read from her past life, a similar episode was described. The spy infiltrated the enemy group and met with him to finish him off. However, this enemy shared a loaf of bread with him and ended up being a spy. He was unable to put him into eternal sleep and simply left. This story exposes human nature. However, the young lady understands that it is humanity that is alien to Hikan, because for him it is an extremely stupid thing. The guy then just sighs, and the young lady wonders if it really worked. But then the young man only very quickly raises his hand and swings at the girl. The main character closes her eyes and wonders if her brother is really going to throw the bun on the floor and trample it with his foot, because if that's the case, success awaits her. However, the guy looking at his sister still does not move, after which he simply lowers his hand with the bun and, heading towards the exit, states that the funeral will take place tomorrow. And the main character then opens one of her eyes to see what happened. And when she sees the guy leaving, she thinks that she didn't understand whether she failed her mission or not. The nanny immediately runs up to her mistress, worried about her, after which he hugs the main character and says that she must have been very scared. The young lady thinks that she can't stop trembling, and then she realizes that she thought so she should leave this place as soon as possible. But if she has to hide her identity, then she needs to work hard and have money. Remembering the money, the girl thinks that she needs it. However, even if she sells all her dresses and jewelry, she will not be able to earn much. But there are other ways, and these are the secrets of the main characters, as well as knowledge of events, and the girl must use all this to survive. But one way or another, she will have to continue to portray holy innocence in front of Hikan, and stay on the estate until she saves enough money, although the little girl doesn't think it will be that easy. The next day, the main character is at her father's funeral. And when she takes a shovel to throw a piece of earth into the grave, she looks at her brother, and then he still throws a little earth. The nanny just thinks how poor her young lady is, because she has already lost 2 parents. But the main character comes up to her and says that she is fine. Young people understand that her nanny is the only person she can trust in this place, but if she finds out that the girl is going to run away, she will simply faint. So the main character understands that she should think about this later. But then she hears someone talking to each other, and one woman says that the guy is only 16 and too young to rule the dukedom. Julio should still take on the powers of the duke. But the man only asks whether he can occupy such a high position. The young lady realizes that Julio is the cousin of the previous Duke of Pesteros, and he has recently become famous due to the success of his enterprise. And he is a man who doesn't have a lot of money, so he would never take on such a burden, but they still don't back down. However, as they say, the Duke left them too early and his place cannot be taken by direct heirs, so Hikon had to take this place. But the guy is too young, so he needs a mentor, and let the girl not deny that one of their relatives should become the Duke's deputy. But they all just want to take advantage of a warm place in order to get their own pockets, and the young lady very much doubts that Hikon, who is not lacking in intelligence, did not guess about this, and he is probably going to take his rightful place by force when the young lady sees that the burial of the grave is finished and looks at her brother, thinking whether he is sad or whether the guy is just playing because she can't understand what he's thinking about. But then the main character realizes that at such a moment, she should hold his hand since she is playing the role of his innocent little sister. But when the young lady takes his hand, she thinks how cold it is. After which, the baby turns to her brother and asks if he is okay. The guy just tells Dahlia not to grab his hand whenever she wants, and the main character thinks that she knew that the guy would say this. But then she doesn't understand why he didn't push her away and whether he doesn't want to waste his energy on this. Then someone else comes to these two and tells the young master and the young lady that he needs to say something. The guy turns around at the same moment and takes his hand away from the young lady. Then he coldly asks what they want to say. Other people get a little nervous and then say that until the guy turns 18, he needs a guardian. And after they discussed everything, they came to a conclusion. But Hikon then only asks who gave them the right to interfere in the affairs of their family. He also angrily asks if they have the last name Pesteros. The young lady understands that, first of all, her brother is a transcendent, and even though he is only 16, his essence changes everything radically, and since he is much stronger than an ordinary person, he does not need a guardian at all. And these people are only trying to establish a trusting relationship with the dominant family. However, Hakon does not need this at all, and the man then cries out to the young master and claims that Lady Dahlia is still too young. The main character thinks what they are talking about, and the man then claims that perhaps the young master does not need protection, but Lady Dahlia is a completely different matter, and while she is young, she needs protection. The guy then looks at his sister coldly, and the main characters are scared by this, and he wonders if the black cat crossed her path, because if Hikon considers her a nuisance, he will immediately get rid of her, and if the young lady somehow interferes with his plans, then what will happen if he finishes her off? Therefore, the little girl immediately grabs her brother's jacket. The guy then looks at his sister in surprise, and the girl claims that only her brother can come to her. The man then turns to the young lady and tries to tell her something, but the girl claims that her brother is her only protector, and she doesn't even know their names and faces. Therefore, the young lady has tears in her eyes. She asks if they have lost all shame. The uncle below is at her father's funeral. Therefore, the girl asks if they don't think now is not the time or place for such conversations. These people then silently do not know what to answer, after which he claims that the young lady is right, and perhaps today is the best time, after which they leave. And when they do this, the main character sighs with relief and thinks that at least today victory is hers, and they will probably return. But at least today there is one less problem. After which the little girl, looking at her brother, thinks whether she did a good job. But when she sees the expression on his face, she's a little surprised and thinks, what else is this? Then the guy turns to Dahlia and claims that, and it seems that now they are the only ones left. The main character then thinks in shock if her brother really wants to say that he only has to get rid of her. A short time later, while in her mansion, the young lady thinks that a month has already passed since the funeral. Day after day, distant relatives flock to their estate to resolve the issue of guardianship, and each of them sacrifice to receive the wealth of the Duchy of Pesteros. And since they realize that they would not be able to get close to Hikon, they all flock to her like bees to honey. However, like them, the young lady is also in complete despair, and if she continues to hold on to Hikon, dark clouds will hang over her because she only continues to repeat the same thing like a parrot. The girl claims every time that she doesn't need anyone except her brother, and because of this, high society rumors arose that the younger sister of the young Duke of Pesteros is simply crazy about her brother. Now sitting with a mug of tea, the young lady thinks that she is even a little offended, but since Hikon has now relaxed his guard, she can be calm. In addition, due to her constant refusals, her relatives finally stopped coming there, so at least she doesn't have to worry about this anymore. After all, her actions bore fruit. Now the woman sitting opposite the main character says that this is what happened to the girl while she was away. This woman is a representative of one of the 4 ruling ducal families of the Empire Frederick, Duchess of Blueport Transcendent. When the young lady was just born, she cried a lot, and one of the maids claimed that the girl was crying again, and then asked what they should do and when the Duke would come. Another maid claimed that because of the death of the Duchess, he did not want to see the young lady. However, then one woman came up to the girl and took her in her arms. She asked if the baby's name was Dahlia. But it's lovely. After which she said her name. Now the woman asks if the little ones are not sad because of the death of their father. But the main character says that, to be honest, this might sound strange, but she doesn't feel anything at all. The woman tells the girl not to worry because she thinks this is normal. Then he asks if the little girl wants more cookies, and the young lady replies that yes. The girl thinks that she cannot believe that this woman is already over 40, and is it really all because of the fact that she is transcendental? The woman is the head one of the 4 ruling ducal families of the Frederick Empire. Duchess of Bluefort, and her power lies in creating a perfect barrier capable of blocking everything. However, before her powers awakened, the woman lost her husband in a fire, and she herself received many burns all over her body. And since then, she always wears gloves and a mask to hide her scars. From that moment on, touch became unpleasant for her, and she does not even attend social events, and the main character has never touched her hand. The woman now claims that when the girl was a baby, she always thought when she would finally grow up, but still she is glad that the baby has not changed a bit. The little girl tells the woman to stop teasing her, and then she claims that she even drinks milk every day. The Duchess says what a cutie the girl is, and the main character thinks that, however, this woman is a really good person and she has never seen her get angry, but the Duchess took care of her from the moment her parents left her. She also has a son with the Duke of Louvain-Bleufer, so it must be hard for her to take care of both of them. Now the guy is in the Duchy of Blutsfort, and they say that he is not going to return to the capital for the next 4 years. The young lady is sitting with a mug of tea, and the woman then turns to her and asks what it was like to meet her brother for the first time in 13 years. The main character then thinks a little and doesn't know how best to say it. And then she shows her horns above her head and says that her brother is unrealistically scary. The woman only smiles in response to this, and then says that people often feel fear of transcendence. After all, a lot of troubles happened because of them. The main character then only waves her head in agreement and thinks that because transcendence often went crazy, ordinary people were afraid of them. And although most of the berserker conversions were predicted by the imperial family, a terrible incident occurred 30 years ago, during which Duke Artus turned into a berserker and plunged all the wizards of the imperial palace into eternal sleep. Then even those who previously could not move from fear rebelled. These people demanded the expulsion of all transcendence from the empire, and to calm them down, the previous emperor decided to impose restrictions. For example, all transcendents were ordered to report on their state of mind, and about 10 points were added to the code. The main character thinks that everything has its price. However, thanks to the measures taken, turning into a berserker has been avoided for many years. But according to the plot of the Ouroboros Labyrinth, soon the transcendents will begin to go crazy. But unfortunately, the game did not say how or when this happened, and all that is known about the young lady is that the incident occurred at the ball. And from that moment on, the transcendents quickly began to go crazy, from which the imperial family was unable to stop it. And even the Duchess will become afraid of her son, so the main character, looking at her, only sighs and thinks that perhaps being a person who knows the plot of the original game is quite lonely. The young lady says that even though she is not afraid of the woman at all, she will grow from the thought that her brother might someday sell her. After the topic, the little girl asks what if he marries her to some old skin with a beer belly, or one day brings his brother-in-law there and forces her to give birth to transcendence from him. Therefore, the little girl claims that she decided that when she becomes an adult and independent, she will run away from there. After all that was said, the woman already choked on her tea and then asked where such thoughts came from in the little girl's head. And also, has the girl gone crazy? The main character just looks away and says no. And then she wonders if she went too far, but that's exactly what she would have expected from Hikan. The woman turns to the young lady and tells her to listen, after which she asks if the little girl thinks it's stupid to think about running away, just because she's afraid of her brother. After all, not even a month had passed since they started living together. The main character thinks that she expected such an answer. The woman then realizes that she is speaking too harshly to the young lady, and then places her hand on hers. and they ask for forgiveness, claiming that because she herself is a transcendental person, she instinctively took the side of the young duke. Well, she tells the little girl that in fact, the life of people like them is full of loneliness and pain, and the Duchess would be very happy if she and her brother became closer. After which she tells Dahlia that whatever she wanted to share, she will always be there. The main character thinks these are such kind words, but she doesn't know if she can get closer to Hikon, because even when he looks at her with his gaze, her heart clenches in her chest. And the little girl simply couldn't answer the Duchess. The girl thinks that apparently her brother knew that the Duchess of Bluefort loved her very much, so for some time peace and quiet reigned between them. A short time later, Hikon told his sister that she had a warmer relationship with the Duchess of Bluefort than he thought. Who is the time when the guy blurted out for no reason and goosebumps ran across her skin? And the young lady thinks that if there is no enmity between them, this does not mean that everything is smooth now, and apparently she was on the wrong path from the very beginning. The girl created the image of a stupid and innocent little sister who simply adores her brother, and if she wants to maintain this image, then she needs to act as nice as possible. But when the little girl looks at her brother from the door of the room, she thinks that he is so creepy. And when she looks at him, she gets goosebumps. But the girl understands that now she should discard such thoughts, so she enters the room and turns to her brother with a smile, although inside she is almost shedding tears. A little time later, when the little girl learned to make origami from her tutor, then she folded a turtle that listens to wishes, and the first one to receive it was Hikon. The young lady, when she turned on this origami to her brother, in her thoughts, she begged him to accept her feelings. The guy, looking at the origami, asked what it was, and the little girl answered that people say that she listens to wishes and the brother's desire, but the guy does not allow the young lady to finish her sentence and exhales her from the room, claiming that they do not need such nonsense, so let her leave. The main character then wondered if she was just thrown out of the door, after which she leaned towards her origami and asked Hikon to open his heart to other people, but unfortunately nothing happened. After this, the little girl learned to draw. Looking at her drawing, she thought it was great, and now she can draw Hikon. Well, when she brought this drawing to her brother, he just looked coldly, and he asked what it was and whether the girl had drawn the devil. The main character only thought with a smile on her face that he was right. A little while later, one girl also asked her brother how he was doing today, and if he was doing well. But the guy then just turned around and told her to be silent. The main character thinks that he could at least say hi to her, and she's so lonely now. Well, if you compare him with the evil character in the game, then everything is not so bad. But at least it doesn't seem like he's planning to sell or finish her off. Looking at her bouquet, the main character thinks that it turned out pretty well and decides to give this bouquet to her brother. The girl, looking at the flowers in her hands, thinks that in case of emergency she can always run away. Then the young lady turns to the gardener and asks if his lady is going to give flowers to the young duke, and the girl answers yes. The young man then says that she seems to love the young master very much, and the main character replies that, of course, and asks how the guy thinks he will like the wreath. The guy says that undoubtedly, and in the end, the baby made it with her own hands. The main character at this time is thinking what to do if he throws this wreath in the trash, because he doesn't like anything as a gift to her brother. But then the girl thinks a little and says that if you think about it, and then it's worth giving one to Bucky too, so she hands the wreath to the gardener. The guy, in shock, asks if the lady will give this to him, and Dahlia says that yes, and since the guy helped her pick flowers, he deserved a reward. After which the little girl says that it suits the guy very well. So the young lady continued to weave wreaths, one she made for the Duchess Bluefort, and it looks like she just has golden hands. After all, a little later the maids also wore a wreath. The young lady, looking at the last wreath, thinks that there is only one left for Hikana. But then the little girl realizes in shock that she forgot something very important. In the printed edition of The Secret of the Labyrinth, Ouroboros's main secret has been revealed, Hikana. And precisely that he's allergic to pollen, so we look at the bouquet in our hands, and the young lady thinks that she just wasted her time. But then she puts the flowers on the floor and thinks that next time she will do something better for the guy. Hikon, he's looking out the window as the baby leaves the wreath on the ground and leaves. And then the servant turns to him and says that the master must be glad that he has such a charming little sister. But the guy just tells the butler to stop talking nonsense and quickly remove this twig monstrosity. from his head, after which the young man sat down at his chair and began to think about Dahlia, but she is his only younger sister. What the late Duchess so desperately wanted was a very normal child. Before his arrival at the estate, the guy planned to get rid of her as soon as the girl got in his way, and if only he could see what thoughts were spinning in her head, otherwise he would certainly plunge her into eternal sleep. But it doesn't seem like the girl he saw even once thought of anything bad. After all, until now she only chatted tirelessly and gave disgusting gifts, and since this is all she is capable of, then for now he can leave her, and in the future, if the girl becomes useless, he will deal with her. And of course it is very annoying that she revolves around him for days on end, and also with feigned kindness and gives him useless things. But after this, the young man looks at the street and at the wreath that lies on the ground, after which he frowns a little and turns around. The next day, the young lady thinks that her plan to conquer Hikana's payment is going smoothly so far. This means that the only thing left for her to do is save enough money to become independent. So the little girl turns to Darlene, asks if she will be on her side no matter what. The maid replies that yes, and if she doesn't support her lady, then who else will? The main character then says that Darlene is simply a saint, and then he tells the nanny that she needs to save some money. Darlene is a little shocked by this and asks what she is talking about. And the main character thinks that if she tells the Duchess that she is preparing to escape, then the Duchess of Bluefort will certainly try to stop her. So now the little girl claims that sometimes it seems to her that her brother wants to kick her out. So she would like to get her savings. Then, looking at her nanny, she wonders if the woman really didn't buy it. But she just grabs the little girl by the hands and says how poor her lady is, because how she would like to say that the young duke will never drive her away. But she is afraid that in this case she will lie, after which she asks the little girl how she can help her. This makes the main character smile and thinks that first she should sell her jewelry and dresses. The nanny claims that it would be great to sell off all her belongings, but the maid carefully checks the lady's wardrobe so that the truth will quickly emerge. Risking her life, the nanny sold several of her dresses and jewelry, but even so they managed to avoid suspicion. A little time later, a couple of maids were counting what was in the wardrobe, and one of them claimed that it seemed to her that the young lady's outfits began to disappear somewhere, and the other said that she needed to check everything again. The main character, watching them, realized that it seemed like it was time to call it a day. The girl understood that she probably couldn't raise money in this way, but she knew that there were still plenty of ways to earn extra money. Looking at the box for secret diaries and the gold coins wrapped in cloth for safekeeping, the girl mentally thanks her nanny. But then she sighs and thinks how she can continue to save money because she no longer wants to expose Darlene danger. A short time later, the Duchess chokes on her tea, and in shock, they ask the little girl if she is saving money, but someday she will bring down the Duchess's grave with her tricks. The main character then says that, however, this is really very important to her, and the Duchess only sighs and then claims that she heard in the office of the previous Duke, Pesteros, keeps a lot of books, and there the girl will be able to find what she needs. Dahlia understands that if you think about it, her late father really read a lot of books. Therefore, it is quite possible that there will be very rare books there, so that if the little girl hides a couple and then sells them, no one will even notice. At least she thought so, but now the book just falls to the ground and the main character thinks how this happened. The young lady's brother stands next to her and coldly asks what she was trying to do. The little girl is shocked and thinks how it all came to this. A short time later, the maid is already treating her mistress's wound and asks how she got hurt like that. The main character says that she was playing on the library stairs and fell, and the maid says how lucky it is that everything turned out okay. But then he asks in shock if the young duke didn't just come out of there, and the main character just averts her gaze. A little time ago, she was walking through the library and thought that this was great, because there was no one there and she should pick up a couple of books as soon as possible and then quickly get out of there. But the girl thought that it didn't look like there were books there that she could make a good profit from. However, then the little girl saw the stairs and immediately approached it, after which I climbed onto it and thought that it was a little creepy there, and that I needed to quickly find something worthwhile and then go down. The little girl understands that if you think about it, most of these books are dedicated to transcendentals, and each of them describes how they fall into madness or warn of a threat. The little girl then takes out one of the books and looks at it with interest and then reads the title, which says about the essence of the transcendental and where they came from. The little girl then claims that since it is a copy of the first edition, it must be worth a lot, so in that case, she will sell it. But suddenly someone turns to the young lady and asks what she is doing there. I watched the baby of the day maintain her balance on the stairs and immediately fall off it. Having fallen, the little girl grabs her leg because a sharp pain pierces her. Her brother claims that apparently she has gotten into the habit of bending around like a rat. The young man looks at her coldly, and the main character begins to shake with fear and says that it's simple. But the guy doesn't let her finish and takes the book in his hands, then opens it on one of the pages and reads what's written there. Yes, it is written so that people should not be mistaken, for these creatures are not like them. After all, the very essence of transcendence is different from human, after which the young man closes the book and says what is written there. And looking at her sister, she asks if Dahlia really thinks the same. The main character understands that she's screwed, and the girl wonders why she got caught in the red right then, when she tried to steal a book with similar content, but she knew that the slightest mistake and her relationship with Hikan would go to ruin. Until now, the baby had played the role of his innocent little sister. But the guy caught her while reading a book that talks about the difference between transcendence and ordinary people. And the young lady then comes up with an excuse, saying that she is friends with the Duchess of Bluford, so how can she think so? After this, the little girl says that she just wanted to learn something about the transcendence in order to understand her brother a little better. The guy asks what she means by the word understand after what. She shoves the book at the little ones and says that these are the words she said. Only proves that she will never be able to understand him. The main character then just shakes her head, denying it. The opponent claims that it seems she didn't realize anything. Then she asks if she knows what fate befell their beloved grandfather. And then the young man claims that he met his death after turning into a berserker and smashing the entire Pesteros estate brick by brick. He also tried to put his own daughter, that is, their deceased mother, into eternal sleep. After this, the woman began to be insanely afraid of transcendentals, despite the fact that she herself was one of them, and this fear consumed her. The woman was afraid to die at the hands of her son, who was transcendental, and so she sent him far away from herself. The main character thinks that Hikan's past was never revealed in the original novel. The young man asks Dahlia what she will say to this, and the girl understands that she just found out that her mother drove Hikan away because he was transcendental. And now she understands why she had not seen him at the estate before, but the young lady understands that now is not the time to think about it, because if she continues to remain silent, it will be bad. After which the baby turns to Hikan and says that he is her only brother, after which the little girl lowers her gaze and says that he is also a good person. The guy then gets up and says that it is clear, and the girl thinks that, however, Hikan continues to maintain distance between them, and no matter what she says, her words cannot reach him. The guy then just turns around and leaves. And the main character, hearing the sound of his steps, only desperately looks at the floor. The young lady remembers the words of the Duchess that, in fact, the life of people like them is full of loneliness and pain. But Dahlia wonders if Hikan's words meant that she would never be able to understand him because it seemed to her how lonely he looked. And for some reason, she immediately remembered a scene from the game. It was a conversation between the main character Adelicia and Hikan after he kidnapped her. The girl claimed that all was not lost and they could return to what was before. But the main character argued that no, and they were no longer able to overcome this because they were not given the opportunity to return love or trust each other, and therefore he had only one way left. When the girl was playing and he was just a character, she kept cursing him, and the main character still continued to sympathize with such a blockhead, so the young lady considered her an angel in the flesh. However, the girl wonders what kind of emotions flashed across his face. Now the maid asks if Hikan left the baby even after seeing her fall. And he's such a villain. The main character thinks that it is impossible to return him there because he really has a rather bad character. However, remembering her brother, the girl still claims that he is not a bad person at all. The maid then tries to object, but the girl claims that if she tries, then one day her brother will definitely love her. The maid then almost cries, and the little girl tells Darlene that she shouldn't do this. But then the main character hears someone walking past the door and wonders if someone just overheard their conversation. The girl thinks that it's good that she didn't slander Hikan. The young lady thinks that she hid the book that she stole in her secret chest and got another chest because the book is too big. but she cannot believe that she had to suffer so much because of the little book. However, at least it's expensive. At this time, the young lady's brother bursts into his office, and leaning on the table, he puts his hand on his forehead. The guy thinks, why did he do this? After all, he only wanted to intimidate the girl so that she would no longer suffer from all sorts of nonsense. But when he saw how she stared at him with her big eyes, he blurted out his whole story to her like a complete fool. And then I heard Dahlia say that if she tries, then one day her brother will definitely love her. The guy understands that the girl began to bother him from the very first day of their meeting, and these eyes, which showed absolutely no fear, expressed some kind of anxiety. When the little girl found out about the death of their father, she did not show any emotions even in front of him. And in the guy's entire life, no one had ever behaved like this with him before, so when he feels the young lady's gaze on him, different feelings rage in his chest. But Hikon immediately clenches his fist and thinks that such a thing is impossible, because everything is as he told Dahlia, since grandfather went crazy and his mother was the previous Duchess of Pesteros. She began to deny her essence as a transcendent and despised her own kind. Therefore, of course, she did not want her child to be a transcendental person, and even if her child was not smart or had a bad character, all she wanted was this normal child. But despite her wishes, the firstborn turned out to be a transcendent. The guy was precocious and overly smart since childhood. He was also very independent and aloof, transcendental father, and when the boy was a child, a friend and her son visited his mother. The woman said how long it had been since they had seen each other and thanked her friend for coming. Hikon understands that the whole time her brat was in the estate, he got on his nerves. The boy pointed at Hikon and called him a transcendent. The young man also claimed that his mother told him about this, and then asked what the guy was playing. But when the boy returned the toy, it turned out to be already broken, and the boy claimed that he had only touched it, and it immediately broke. Hikon then looked at this boy clearly, and then immediately threw him down the stairs. This kid fell down the stairs and broke his leg. And my mother thought that Hikon did this on purpose and began to avoid him even more. And then Dahlia was born. After my mother was told that she was infertile, she thought that she would never have another child. However, after the birth of this child, she believed that God himself had sent Dahlia to them. The guy became a dirty stain on the family's reputation, and then he was sent to a distant relative, saying that this way he would gain experience as the future head of the family. However, even after the death of his mother, he was not allowed to return to the estate for 10 years. And he was able to return there again only after both his parents left this world. Looking at the portrait of his mother, Hikon only grins and thinks that this family has decided to simply erase his existence, and for such actions they will never be forgiven. The guy remembers his younger sister and thinks that he will never allow himself to fall in love with this child. This is exactly how Hikon tried to instill such thoughts in himself. After that, time passed, and now 6 months have passed since the young lady began to live with Hikon. Day by day she continued to desperately shower him with love, but even now she still gets goosebumps from him. And yet, it seems to the young lady that after the library incident, Hikon finally stopped being wary of her. Although the little girl thinks that she should admit that she has a new problem, and the fact that she doesn't know at all what to do next, the girl understands that she must behave like a stupid, kind, innocent little sister. However, she no longer has a single idea, so she does not understand what to do. The little girl then turns to Sebastian, "No?" And the butler then turns to the young lady and asks if something happened to her. The baby then asks if he understands, and then what she can do to make her brother happy. Know what to answer to this, and then puts his hands on the baby's shoulders. And he says that Lady Dahlia has already done a great job. The main character thinks that for some reason it seems to her that she has just won his heart, but she does not think that the butler will help her with advice. A short time later, the main character is already at a picnic and asks what her older brother might like. The Duchess says that she must admit that she likes this much better than her previous question. She then turns to the maid and tells her to bring her paper and a pen. The main character thinks why the Duchess needs this, and the woman signs it. And he says that if Hikon wants to take the place of the Duke according to the law of their empire, then he needs to get support from another transcendental person who will confirm that he is of a sober mind and clear memory. The main character wonders if a woman is really ready to put such a burden on her shoulders just for her sake, but then screams in shock that this is too much. The girl understands that this will certainly affect the future of this world, and it is quite possible that if Hikon goes crazy, it will be the Duchess of Bluefort, who held him, who will one day fall under attack. The woman tells the baby not to worry because this is a normal formality and it will not affect her in any way. After which, she hands over this paper and says that she hopes this will help the baby improve her relationship with her brother. The main character thinks that of course she wants her and her brother to become closer, but the girl didn't even think that the Duchess was so worried about her. The young lady with tears in her eyes looks at the paper and thanks the woman. A little time later, the little girl realizes that of course it took her a lot of courage to give this to Hikan upon his return to the estate. Dahlia wondered what to do if he found it too suspicious and kicked her out. But then the little girl looked into her brother's office and turned to him, after which she immediately showed him the paper right in front of his face and asked if she was a good girl. After all, the Duchess of Blueford is her longtime friend, so she... But the young lady's brother interrupted her and said that he had already received permission from His Majesty the Emperor, so he no longer needed it. The main character then realizes in shock that if you think about it, according to the plot of the game, Hikan was a childhood friend of the Emperor, and since the latter was a transcendent, it was not difficult for him to prepare documents for the appointment of Hikan to the position of Duke. The baby then apologizes and says that she thought her brother would like it. But Hikan then snatches the paper from her hands and says that perhaps he will find a use for it. Now let the girl leave. Dahlia wonders where it will find use. And he won't sell it because the duchy doesn't have a lot of money, but the girl doesn't understand why he needs this paper. After all, if what the butler said is true, then with the exception of a document confirming the legitimacy of Hikan's right of inheritance, I need a paper signed by another transcendent. But since this question did not leave the young lady alone, she decided to quietly take away the paper that the Duchess of Blueford had given her. But what's even stranger is that the guy didn't even notice her disappearance. Eros. He didn't care about her. The little girl doesn't understand why he took her. But the young lady still understands that, contrary to the wishes of the Duchess of Blueford, her efforts did not bring her closer to Hikan. Perhaps because he had not yet harmed anyone, the main character began to fear him less and less. But suddenly, someone breaks into the young lady's room, which makes her very scared. It turns out to be Hikan. He turns to the young lady and says that it's just him, so don't let her be scared. And the main character thinks that if you remember the sun, here's a ray of light. After which, the little girl asks her brother what's the matter, and then claims that His Majesty the Emperor has finally approved his request for an audience. The main character thinks that the last thing Hikan needs to officially assume the position of Duke is a meeting with the Emperor, during which he will transfer the title of the previous Duke. The main character thinks that waiting for the issue to be approved only took a couple of days, and that's all great, of course. But the girl doesn't understand when they became so close to talk about this. Therefore, the little girl approaches her brother and congratulates him a little awkwardly. The young man claims that the Emperor asked him to bring Dahlia with him, and the day after tomorrow they are leaving for the Imperial Palace, so let the girl get ready. The main character is shocked by this, thinks what he is talking about, and then asks if she will go too. Her brother replies that this is absolutely true. And the little girl thinks that if Hikan is heading to the palace to receive the title, then why is she going there? But when the girl sees her brother's gaze demanding an immediate response, she gets scared. And then he just nods. The guy then turns around and leaves. The main character thinks that as soon as this bastard got the answer he wanted, he immediately set sail. And the little girl, looking after him, thinks that he should come around and with his own hands seem to be casting a spell on his brother. But of course, this did not happen. The girl thinks that in any case, no matter how you look at it, you can't trample on the imperial order. The nanny invites the young lady to drink a cup of herbal tea before bed, and the girl says that apparently the day after tomorrow, she will have to go to the imperial palace, and the nanny screams in shock at this. What is she talking about? Then she screams that they should postpone the tea party until later, and again they should immediately order a new dress for her. 2 days later, the young lady was already dressed in a beautiful dress. The little girl thinks that no matter what she wears, she looks simply charming. The nanny tells her mistress that when she grows up, she will be a real beauty. The baby just nods at this, but she herself thinks that the only question is whether she will be able to live up to this moment. After this, the girl goes outside and, looking at the carriage, sees her brother there. The baby wonders if he's really waiting for her because it's so unexpected. After which the baby approaches her brother and thanks Togo for waiting. The girl wonders if he won't even give her his hand, after which she approaches the carriage and one of the servants gives her his hand. The young lady's brother then also enters the carriage. When they are already heading along the way, the girl asks her brother why she was called to the palace, and the guy just remains silent and then turns away. The main character, looking at all this, cannot understand what happened, and after Hikan squeezes his hand, the girl thinks about why he is dissatisfied this time. In her thoughts, the little girl asks him to answer, but the whole way the young man does not answer. A short time later, they are informed that the carriage has arrived. And when the main character gets out of the carriage, her brother still doesn't help her, but he just glances sideways at how the little girl takes the servant's hand. The main character wonders why he's been looking sideways all day like he's eaten too many lemons. The guy just tells his sister to get in faster, and the little girl agrees and thinks that he's kind of strange today. A short time later, they are already in the audience hall of the imperial palace, and the young lady thinks how beautiful it is there. When they approach the throne, the man says that they have finally arrived. This turns out to be Emperor Alexander Duncan Mikhailio II. He is a young emperor, barely over 30, and a transcendental figure who appeared once in the original story, although due to his age, he was not made one of the love interests. And the guy's ability is to read people's emotions during physical contact. The girl thinks that thanks to this power, he is able to recognize any emotions that other people have for him. Because of this, it is simply impossible to deceive him. In addition, the emperor's self-control was so high that he was able to maintain his sanity until he fell into eternal sleep. The guy claims that he met the baby's brother many times. However, they meet Lady Dahlia Pesteros for the first time. The main character then only bows and says that it is a great honor for her to meet His Majesty. The guy offers to dispense with the formality, or claims that he cannot believe that the girl is really one of the Pesteros. In fact, he invited her there, because he believed that it was her first time attending the title ceremony. After which the man asks how she can live with her brother and whether he cares about her. After this, Dahlia just shudders and thinks that she can't tell the emperor that her brother doesn't care about her. After thinking, the mouse with a smile on his face says that of course, after all, he is not the only and beloved brother, and without him the girl is like without hands. The blonde then says that he understands and that the girl is probably afraid. After all, his character is far from sugar. The baby, looking at her brother, only remains silent, and the prince then says that he must admit that such a charming little sister is a real blessing. After which he turns to Hikan and asks if he could come to him, after which the prince hands the guy a document and tells him to hold it. Afterwards, he says that from now on, he appoints him Duke of Pesteros, and Hikan thanks him. The main character understands that there is no smell of sincerity there. The emperor says that with the death of her father, a lot of work has accumulated, so let him try. And then he turns to Lady Dahlia and asks if she could come to him. The main character then agrees, and the prince asks how such a charming little sister managed to fall in love with Hikan. Grandmother says that the emperor embarrasses her, and she claims that few people know this. But the life of transcendence is full of loneliness and pain. However, the girl, by some miracle, without understanding Togo, took an important place in the heart of Hikan. The young lady's brother then addresses His Majesty, and the blonde just continues and speaks that he can measure it more clearly than anyone else. Hikan then looks angrily at the emperor and says that apparently his imagination was just running wild. And the blonde says that it's interesting, and since Hikan insists, it's probably true. Falling down, the emperor extends his hand to the young lady and thanks her for coming such a long way only on his whim. The main character understands that when the conversation comes to an end, the emperor always extends his hand to the interlocutor because he is nervous during the conversation. It would seem that he is trying to create a relaxed atmosphere and smooth out the aftertaste, but this is a falsehood that allows him to read the true feelings of his interlocutor. After all, no one has the right to refuse to take the emperor's hand, but when the main character finally shakes his hand, she doesn't understand why he still doesn't let her go. The emperor then looks at the girl in surprise, and a little time later when the baby is already turning to His Majesty. Then he realizes that he has been holding her hand for too long, and then lets go of the girl. The man then looks at his hand in surprise, and in the main game, her brother does not understand why he is doing this. The emperor then asks Lady Dahlia for forgiveness and tells her not to pay attention, and the main character, waving her head, says that it's okay. But after this, the emperor turns to the girl and says that, by the way, he cannot believe that such a charming young lady still does not have a groom, so the man asks what she thinks about his sons. The young lady thinks how funny it is and says that she thanks His Majesty for the compliment. But the man then claims that he is not joking and he is serious. After such words, Dahlia thinks in shock what he is talking about and what kind of news this is. The man claims that among all his sons, 2 of them are the same age as the young lady, and he recommends taking a closer look at Leonard and Cedric because she knows that Leonard is the crown prince, and even though he often likes to fool around, he is a nice guy. And maybe his second son is a little reserved, but he's not bad at all. The main character thinks that even if this is all just a joke, that expression on the Emperor's face is very frightening, and Dahlia doesn't even know what to answer. The girl is very nervous and thinks, is this really true? And will she really become a bride right now and also get a groom so easily? The little girl thinks that even though the nobles are trained in their youth, if the Emperor is not joking, then her brother is unlikely to refuse him. Then this is an excellent opportunity for him to get rid of his useless younger sister 3 and become related to the imperial family. Well, if the girl is engaged to the prince, then she will probably become known throughout the empire, and this will interfere with her plan to escape in order to start a completely new life. The young lady then very nervously says that it is a great honor, but the young lady's brother then prevents her from finishing and addresses His Majesty. The baby understands that she is now done for, and her entire future is predetermined because now her head will definitely fly off her shoulders along with Hikan's head. However, Hikan claims that Dahlia will not get engaged, because for now she does not intend to do this with anyone. The Emperor then asks with a smile on his face if this is really so, and the young lady's brother replies that yes, and that's exactly it. The main character understands that he said it bluntly, and she has never been so grateful to him. The Emperor then asks why not, and Hikan says that it doesn't look like the girl wants it herself. The man then says what a pity, but he really wanted Lady Dahlia to become his daughter-in-law. The main character understands that it was still a joke, but the girl does not understand who is joking with such a serious expression on her face. After which they announce that it is time for them to go. And when the baby leaves, she says goodbye to His Majesty and thanks him for such a generous offer and his care. The Emperor then looks at her a little surprised, and then, with a smile on his face, he says that this is true and invites Lady Dahlia to meet again with Hikan too. After the Emperor is left alone, he looks at his hand, in which he recently held the baby's hand. The man understands that at first everything is in charge of the Transcendents and their unsurpassed intelligence and strength, but on the blanket, the life of the Transcendents is like being in endless agony. And the man thinks, is this really a punishment for the fact that they have a power that initially does not belong to them, and every time they use it, they lose part of their mind, and then the desire to destroy everything flares up more intensely. By suppressing these feelings, he became famous as a kind and ambitious emperor because he did not want to see people he loved die at his hands. However, the moment the guy grabbed Lady Dahlia's hand, he felt his mind clear. And even if only for a moment, it was as if he had returned to those times when he had not yet awakened and knew nothing, as if his very soul had been cleansed. But the man thinks that this is a laugh, and it's just impossible to cleanse a soul once defiled by magic. And how could such a thought come to his mind? The Emperor thinks that he is already worried about the fate of these two. After all, no matter how well Hikan pretends to be an adult at heart, he is still a child. And now he is just at that age when he wants to destroy everything around him, so as not to acknowledge his own feelings. Suddenly, the main character loses her footing and falls to the ground, but her brother only looks on indifferently. The Emperor understands that if the guy continues to behave like this, one day he will make a mistake that he will greatly regret. The main character, after they leave, closes the door to the Emperor's room, and when she turns around, she sees that her brother didn't even wait for her. The girl thinks that she is alive, and if she had married someone unknown, all her plans would have failed overnight. Then the girl runs up to her brother and thanks him. The girl claims that she really didn't want any engagement, and Hikan claims that His Majesty often offers such things to just anyone, and if she continues to take his words at face value, then the guy will tease her for the rest of her life. So if Dahlia believed him, she really is an idiot. The main character thinks whether the guy will get hurt if even a couple of affectionate words leave his lips, and he could have walked more slowly. Hikan then turns to his sister and says that he did not expect her to refuse the engagement. The wind doesn't all people dream of a wedding. The main character is trying to catch up with her brother. Breathing heavily, she says that she would like to live as a brother for as long as possible, but she herself thinks that she is already at the limit. Hikon tells the girl not to deceive herself because he simply did not want one of the Pisteros to be treated like an idiot. The main character then says that it's understandable and then claims that she's sorry, after which she collapses. Hikon just turns around and looks at her, and the main character thinks in shock. Why is she doing nothing but disgracing herself today? The young man then sighs and approaches his sister. The main character apologizes to her brother, but he only claims how stupid she is, after which she picks up the girl in her arms, causing Dahlia to start waving her legs in complete shock. Hikon tells her to calm down, otherwise he will drop the baby, after which the main character does so. The girl thinks that her brother may be hot-tempered and also a future villain, but today he saved her, and the girl thinks what if she really gets attached to him? After all, if her plan succeeds, they will separate forever. Therefore, the main character turns to her brother and says that it seems he will be very tall, and in her thoughts she adds that she knows this very well. Hikon asks why the girl is talking all sorts of nonsense again, and the main character says that she just wanted to say. The guy then claims that she shouldn't say anything stupid, and the young lady smiles in response to this and thinks how she would like their relationship to always be like this, and because today Hikon was kinder than usual, it seems she accidentally crossed the line. The young lady says that she is really happy that her brother supported her, and maybe if she continues to love him, then perhaps one day the day will come when he will love her too. The guy then asks if the girl thinks he will love her. The main character is a little wary of this, but the guy then immediately throws her on the floor. The young lady is shocked by this and thinks, why did he do this? But looking at her brother, she sees that he only looks back at her coldly. But then he only turns to Dahlia and asks if he didn't tell her this before. After all, he would never love her and definitely told the young lady not to do anything stupid. The main character in shock thinks why he behaves like this again, and remembering your words that she would like their relationship to always be like this. Tio thinks that it was rather stupid to think about such a thing, after which the girl rises from the floor. Should slip on a banana peel and break his knees. When the guy is already approaching his colleague, the little girl immediately overtakes him and then sits in his place. The girl thinks that no matter how much he hates her, he will not plunge her into eternal sleep just because she took this place. The coachman then announces that they are leaving, and the carriage begins to move. The main character, looking out the window, thinks why her brother constantly pushes her away. And when he caught her in the library, the girl thought that it was inevitable. But just recently, there was such a peaceful atmosphere around them, so the girl doesn't understand why everything is like this, because she doesn't even know how to deal with it. And because she can't explain anything, the girl has such a strange feeling as if she has returned to the beginning. But she doesn't even know if she can say goodbye to him with a pure heart when all this is over. But suddenly the main character hears a very strange sound and, looking at the carriage, sees that there are cracks there. The main character thinks that this is impossible and that the crack really appeared when Hikon squeezed the armrest. Then the little girl looks up and is shocked to see that there are already cracks there too, but then suddenly the back of the head begins to fall off. And the main character falls with him. She immediately screams out her brother's name and stretches out her hand to him. And Hikon, rising from his seat, looks at her in surprise. The main character remembers his words that the guy will never love her and thinks that her brother may not save her. After this, the girl stops pulling her hand and closes her eyes, almost crying, not hoping for anything. But suddenly she feels someone grab her hand, and it turns out to be Hikon. He immediately pulls his sister towards him, and the main character wonders if he saved her. The girl wonders if this is all, because he thinks that since she is Pisteros, she will be useful to him. The young lady thinks that this helped her survive them. In return, no matter how mad he gets, she will still help him even if he becomes the final villain in the end. Of course, the guy will try to brush off her help, but the little girl will continue to help him despite his displeasure. But still, she will continue to prepare to escape, pretending to be his sweet and stupid little sister. A little time later, the baby is already lying in her bed, and when she opens her eyes, she sees her brother there and wonders if she is still sleeping, after which the baby gets out of bed and immediately grabs her brother's hand. The guy is very surprised by this, and the little girl says that she loves him even if he doesn't love her. But then the strength begins to leave her, and the girl realizes that this is not what she wanted to say at all. And after all, she was trying to say that this time she would certainly help him, after which the girl again falls asleep. The young man extends his hand to her but then decides not to do so. The guy understands that no matter how much he scares her and ignores her, Dahlia continues to look at him with kindness. The girl claimed that she loved her brother even if he didn't love her, and when she fell, the guy thought what would happen if he just let her fall into eternal sleep because he didn't have a single reason to save her. And if she were gone, then no one would make him hesitate anymore, and he would also have no expectations from his family. The guy remembers the emperor's words that, however, by some miracle, the girl herself, without understanding Togo, took an important place in Hikon's heart. After all, he can see it more clearly than anyone else. Therefore, the guy is now wondering if the emperor was right. After all, he had been worried ever since Dahlia did not extend her hand to him when she entered the carriage, and these feelings took him by surprise. The girl was the only child of his parents from whom he was so eager to get rid of. Well, she also remained his only sister, and he should have just abandoned her when she fell. But in the end, the guy couldn't ignore her and grabbed her hand. The young man wonders if the girl could read his thoughts and the hesitations on his face at that moment. But now the guy is thinking what he should do when she wakes up. A short time later, the main character wakes up again and thinks that now Hikon also appears in her dreams. But someone turns to her and asks if the girl is awake. It turns out to be the Duchess. The main character also rises from the bed and asks what made her ladyship overcome. Such a long way. The woman claims that she was worried because she knew that the girl was in trouble, and it seemed that Hikon had finally become Duke of Pesteros. But it was such a relief that their meeting with the Emperor went smoothly. After these words, the main character just shakes her head and claims that everything is a little wrong about this. And after some conversations, the girl says that this time her brother decided to save her. It seemed that he doubted until the last second, so that she really thought that he would leave her. The woman claims that even though Hikon insists that he hates the girl, it seems to her that the guy is superfluous and can be honest with himself. After all, transcendentals like her look at their world through the prism of profit. Therefore, as Dahlia said earlier, it is entirely possible that he saved her because the girl is part of his plan, but she cannot claim that this is the only reason. A short time later, the Duchess says that the more time they spend together, the higher the chance that they will become closer, because after all, transcendents are people too. Therefore, the baby may not worry too much. The main character thinks that now, when she thought about it, she remembered that time, when Hikon looked very lonely. The Duchess then turns to the baby and says that if she admits, there was a time when a bad character prevailed over her. The baby, listening to these words from the woman, screams that she is probably joking, but the Duchess claims that it is true. In her youth, she was very selfish and sincerely believed that since she was transcendental, no one could understand her. And even when her husband approached her, the woman at first continued to keep a distance between them. The young lady is then a little surprised at the date of the story. The Duchess only laughs in response to this. But then he claims that the guy continued to pursue her. And when she realized her feelings, she was able to open up to other people. So now she claims that people tend to change. Hey, let the baby never forget that. Dahlia thinks that the Duchess has such a warm smile and looks at her like the girl is her own child. Even though most of her face was covered with a mask, the young lady still felt the warmth emanating from him. However, the main character thinks that this world is inside the game, and falling into madness is Hikon's fate. When the little girl begins to think about all these things, only one question comes to her mind. Why did the Duchess of Blueford appear 4 years earlier? In the game, the head of the family was not the Duchess at all, but one of Levaine's love interests, Blueford. Then the girl thinks what is the fate of the Duchess of Blueford in the game, and why over the next 4 years she changed her mind and passed the title on to her son. The main character thinks that this may be because then she will no longer be in this world. But the girl shakes her head and understands that this cannot happen. The woman just doesn't understand that they are looking at her, and then says that since Hikon has finally become a duke, a ball will soon be held in honor of accepting his title. And the woman will be there, so she offers to meet there next time. The main character asks if this is true, and she herself thinks that seeing the Duchess at the ball is an event that happens only once a year. The woman says that if the baby is not there, she will feel lonely. And the girl thinks that this is true, and probably she just jumped to conclusions, and then claims that she will send her an invitation later. The little girl thinks that in the text of the game, she always looked through it without much enthusiasm. It was definitely said that the Duchess of Blueford lived happily in her hometown, and everything was definitely like that. The main character thinks that even when she regained consciousness, Hikon never visited her. However, the next day, he still showed up for a joint breakfast. While eating, the main character remembers the words of the Duchess that people tend to change, or the girl thinks that step by step, little by little every day, she decided to open her heart to Hikan. After all, it's true that he decided to save her, so the little girl is very grateful to him, and even if it's just her imagination, for some reason it seems to her that Hikan has become completely indifferent. Now the guy is looking at his younger sister, and the girl is noticing his gaze. He immediately smiles sincerely, which makes the guy flinch, and the main character thinks that it seems like he does this every time she smiles. The girl then takes a plate of meat, and thinks that this is her chance because she must dispel suspicions for Hikan once and for all, and for this she must use all her cuteness. The baby then approaches her brother with a plate and says that it is so delicious, so he should eat as many brothers as possible, after which the baby transfers her meat to his plate. But in fact, the main character simply hates lamb. However, when the girl watches the guy take the meat, she sees that he doesn't even touch her piece. But the young lady, clenching her fists, thinks that she needs to calm down because she cannot just give up. The guy, when he looks at his sister, sees her clenched fists, and the main character realizes that everything looks as if she is going to hit him for the first time. After which the baby at the same moment folds her hands into a heart because this is the best thing she came up with. This makes the guy just look at the baby coldly, but then sighs and eats a piece of it. The main character thinks that she wants to fall into the ground out of shame, but wonder if she really looked so bad that he even made such a face. A little later, looking in the mirror, the girl thinks that she should repeat this one more time, after which she again folds her hands into a heart and thinks that this is still strange. After which he folds them again, but in a different way, and thinks, isn't this cute? But still, no matter how you look at her, she is a charmer, but the girl thinks that it is possible that she is too biased towards herself. After which she approaches Sebastian and he leans over and then asks Lady Dahlia what happened. The main character then only shows the heart with her hands and says that she loves it very much. The man was very surprised by this and then told his lady that she should never show this to anyone again. The main character then asks in surprise why and thinks is it really so terrible. Sebastian then screams that it's just so cute that she might get kidnapped. And the young lady thinks that looking at his reaction, the words that he cannot say, like a butler, are something like cute or charming. After this, the young lady smiles and thinks that, as expected, she is not strange at all. A little time later, the girl is already running up to her nanny, and he also shows her this gesture. The woman is very touched by this. And after that, the little girl shows this to other servants of the mansion. The maid asks whether such cuteness can exist in this world. And the main character thinks that not a single person can resist her charm. After all, the entire mansion will be under her feet. The maid then asks to show the girl this again, but the little girl says that she can't do it. But still, after that, he once again shows this gesture with his hands, but at this moment Hikan comes up from the side and silently looks at all this. And the little girl, when she notices this, is very surprised. The guy claims that it looks like she has developed a rather strange hobby, and the main character is very embarrassed by this. The maid then says that with their permission she will go. The guy then claims that he didn't even think that his sister was doing these cute things in front of anyone, and the little girl understands that just as she thought, she should have stopped making such gestures if they were of no use. While Dahlia was doing something incomprehensible, Hikan sat down in his office, sorting out unfinished business. But despite this, the score was inexorably approaching, and this was supposed to be an event in honor of the appointment of a new duke. In the mansion, preparations for the upcoming ball are in full swing, and at this time the main character is calmly sipping tea. Nyanya says that now that she has thought about it, the young lady should find herself a maid of honor if she wants to take part in the holiday. The young lady runs up to the woman and claims that it seems to her that her nanny is the best and she wants to go with her. The girl understands that the 4 ducal houses in which transcendents are born in this empire are similar to the imperial family. So the ladies-in-waiting are simply necessary for them. As a rule, they choose a lady of lower origin of the same age. But the girl thinks, what a pity that she doesn't have a single friend of her own age. And the nanny then turns to her lady and tells her to understand that we would be very glad if the girl were accompanied by a beautiful young lady. The main character says that she understands, and then she will ask her brother about it. The woman tells the lady okay, but then says that her break is already over. The little girl then immediately jumps up from her seat and says that it's good, and then they will see each other later. Dahlia understands that she will dance the first waltz together with her brother, and she will burn with shame if she tramples on his feet, so she needs to try. The teacher says that the lady is doing great and now she has to do the final. The main character tries her best to learn how to dance, and a short time later, with shortness of breath, she thinks that for the first time she completed the dance without a single mistake. The little girl is proud of herself, and the teacher claps her and says that she did a great job. The main character, in response to this, smiles and claims that she performed such a magnificent dance. Just as the Duke arrives there, the young lady turns around in shock. Hikana there. The baby immediately turns to her brother and asks what brought him there. But the young lady's brother only looks at her, so the girl thinks why he stared like that. The teacher says that since the Duke came there, why don't they try to dance together? The main character thinks that this is a bad idea because she only got it perfect once. Therefore, she immediately waves her head and thinks that, besides, she probably won't want to take them to dance with her, but the very mill just smiles, and the main character looks at her brother begging them to just forget about it. The young man's eye twitches from such a look, and after that he still agrees. A short time later, the main character is already dancing with her brother. The girl understands that Hikan is much taller than other young men of his age and is also more mature. In addition, he is the same duke who rules the whole clan, and when in a past life the baby turned 16. All she could think about was how to skip evening classes and eat ramen. And plus the guy dances much better than she thought. Although if you remember Haikon from the original game, then there is absolutely nothing surprising there. But thinking about the game, the girl wonders when the main character will appear, because the story should begin in 3 years during her debut in high society. From this moment on, the interweaving of love lines with male characters should begin while she performs various missions. But suddenly, the young lady puts her foot in the wrong place and thinks that she seems to have made a mistake, after which the baby hits her brother's chest and accidentally steps on his leg. The main character then cries out that she is very sorry, but she herself thinks that she can report with regret that Dahlia lived a very short life, lasting 13 years. The baby then asks if it hurts him and waits for an answer. But Hikan only claims that her kick is nothing to him. After that, they continue to dance, and the main character wonders if they will continue like this. Afterwards, they do the whole dance together, and the girl thinks how relieved she is that she didn't screw up again. The teacher just claps her hands and says it's wonderful, and it seems there is nothing in the world that his lordship cannot do. After which, the woman turns to the baby and says that she is also making progress, and if the ladies continue to practice, then everything will be just perfect. The main character then thanks Madame Masha, and the woman says that perhaps they will finish for today, after which they say that they will meet next time. A little while later, when the young lady is alone with her brother, she thinks that they are alone, and she can't forget how she stepped on his foot, so the little girl thinks what she should say, after which she wants to take her brother by the hand, but he only claims that if she is going to apologize, then she shouldn't. The young lady immediately pulls her hand back and says that it's clear, but then asks her brother why he came, and she thinks that it's unlikely that it's just to look at her dance. The guy claims that this concerns the appointment of her maid of honor, and the little girl then claims that it's true, and that Darlene told her about it. Haikon says that His Majesty the Emperor has already decided who will become her maid of honor. And the main character thinks, what is he talking about? The guy claims that although he has also studied this issue, however, he considers the Emperor's choice much better, but the young lady then asks in shock what he is talking about. The young man only turns to his sister and asks why she is so surprised, and the little girl then looks away and says that it's just like that. The guy then turns to her and asks if Dahlia really thought that he would allow the one who bears the name Pesteros to appear at the ball without a maid of honor. The main character is only thinking if he really just called her Pesteros, but she couldn't even imagine that Hikon would ever say such words. The guy claims that in any case, His Majesty chose her, then let Dahlia treat this girl with due respect. The main character then agrees, and she herself thinks that such a feeling of words on the guy slowly but surely opens his heart to her, as the Duchess of Bluefort said, because little by little, Haikon began to change. The guy's live claim that their first meeting will take place during the ball, and the girl apologizes that she will not be able to arrive there in advance because she has urgent matters. The little one thinks that it seems that this means that Madame Masha will accompany her, and Hikon then says that her maid of honor's name is Adelicia Benitez. Although Viscount Benitez's mouth may not be particularly powerful, There must be some reason why His Majesty chose the girl for this role. The main character is in complete shock from this, thinking that Adelicia Benitez is the main character of the game Ouroboros Labyrinth, and just think that the main character will be her maid of honor. But the young lady certainly did not expect such a development of events. The young lady understands that she needs to calm down and remember what happened in the original plot. Adelicia was born in the village of Canaan, even though it was located by the sea and was popular among tourists, but in reality, this place became a breeding ground for criminals. And the dearest of them was Varix, who raised Adelicia to be a bad girl. However, thanks to the Emperor's hard work, she was saved, and from that moment on, the heroine began to see him as a father. She accepted a role in his shadow and entered high society as a noblewoman named Adelicia to carry out errands. Benitez. Then she met the main characters who became obsessed with her. At least that's how it should be. But in the original, the girl entered high society 3 years later. So the main character thinks, why is this happening so early? And is it really all because of her? After all, since Hikon became the new duke, the emperor probably wanted to keep an eye on him. And for this, he needs to send a spy to the Duchy of Pestaros. And since the young lady now needs a maid of honor, this is the ideal opportunity. The main character thinks that Dahlia never appeared in the original, so he had no reason to send Adelicia to the Duchy of Pestaros. Therefore, young people think that now Adelicia will become her maid of honor. Sooner or later, she will meet Hikon. But if they meet 3 years earlier than in the original story, how much history will change? Initially, when Hikon turned 18 years old, magical powers awakened in him. And just a year later, for the sake of status and part of the head of the family, he began to use his power recklessly. But if you think about it, he just wanted to prove his worth to the family that rejected him. And when he met Adelicia, his mind was already on the edge. The girl wanted him, and Hikon felt both strong love and unbridled hatred for her, but now he has not yet awakened. Therefore, the main character does not even know what will happen if they meet soon, and she is a little worried. But Dahlia thinks it's so exciting, and now she has a rare opportunity to see the original main character. Besides, in the Labyrinth of Ouroboros, Adelicia was her favorite character, and since she's in the game anyway, why not have fun with the ball? After all, no one knows what awaits them in the future. While the young lady was busy with a huge number of things, the day of the ball was inexorably approaching. And now the girl nervously remembers that before meeting with Adelicia, she must properly study the transcendence threatening her. So the young lady tears out one piece of paper from her notebook and begins to draw something there. The girl understands that there are 4 main characters in this game. The first is Aceras. He is the second most insane after Hikon and the only one currently in the capital. The main character thinks that they should be especially wary of him, so she will give him 3 stars. Usually the guy behaves like a devoted servant of the emperor, but in fact he is hiding his transcendental essence and, oddly enough, in contrast to his magical attribute, he also gained enormous holy power during his awakening. Acerus's holy power is capable of healing people on the edge, which is why he decided to leave the Frederick Empire, to become the Pope of the Holy Empire. But despite this, Acerus was never able to cope with his madness since he spent the holy power too often. And so he quickly went crazy. Being a servant of the emperor, he was forced to attend every ball, so the main character thinks that she will soon meet him. Looking at the card, the girl thinks that she is completely reluctant to do something, because outside of her route, Acerus has always played the role of a villain. And in order to get Adelicia, he constantly kidnapped her or started a war, so perhaps this guy likes to create conflicts much more than Hikon. The second is Malden. He is a member of the organization to which Adelicia formerly belonged, and this is a rather difficult route. The third is Levain Bluefort. He is the son of the Duchess of Bluefort. The young lady decides to forget about the second and third since they are not in the capital now, which means their companies should begin in 3 years. However, since the debut Adelicia in high society will begin much earlier, it is difficult to predict what will happen next. The girl squeezes this paper and thinks that okay, after all, Hikon is a priority for her. And now she doesn't know a damn thing about her fate, and she doesn't care about other transcendence. And now she just wants to see Adelicia during the ball and also see what happens to her. After that, the girl decided to throw the plot of the original game out of her head and enjoy the peace. In addition, she did not want to spend money again, and she invested all the money that Hikon gave to buy gold jewelry for the shaft in increasing her savings. stashing it away for a rainy day. Now the girl understands that she is one step closer to success. But then the young lady's brother turns to her and asks why she is laughing. Dahlia realizes that she completely forgot that she is now at the table. The baby then claims that it's all because she can't wait for the ball, and after all, this is her first ball. She just looks at her silently, and the girl understands that before he always answered in monosyllables, and yet he has changed. It's as if she's weakening her defenses in front of her, and, albeit little by little, the young lady is thinking whether the younger generation is really working, but the girl then understands that this is impossible. However, Hikan tried to find a maid of honor for her and even stopped piercing with a cold gaze, and it seemed that she began to sympathize with Hikan. And besides, she absolutely hates him, and when the little girl thinks about the future in which he hurts other people, her heart clenches in pain. But the girl understands that one day she will have to leave her brother, because the more the Transcendental uses his power, the more his soul disintegrates. And the young lady then thinks that she is obliged to leave even the capital if events unfold as in the original. Then, during one of the palace receptions, all transcendents will turn into berserkers. At this time, someone brings the lady's favorite lemon tart to the table and says that it is ready. The main character then eats this tart and thinks that in the palace the obols are held all year round, so she thinks what is the chance that this will become one of them. And now the long-awaited day of the score has arrived. The maid of the morning immediately tore the blanket off the young lady, and everyone in anticipation told her to get up. The main character thinks why their eyes are filled with such determination. A short time later, she is already in the bath, and then she is dressed in a dress. After all these procedures, the baby is finally ready, and one of the maids says that her lady is simply lovely, and she will definitely be the first beauty of this ball. The nanny says that this is of course true, after all, this is their mistress. The young lady then screams for them to stop believing the maids are embarrassing her, after which she immediately pushes them out of the room and says that's enough so they can go. When the young lady finally closes the door, she thinks that now she just has to wait for Miss Masha. Looking in the mirror, the girl thinks how cute she is, after which the baby lies down on the table and thinks about something, after which the girl decides to take her box. And when he opens it, he sees all his savings there as well as a diary. Looking at her contents, the girl thinks that she used to often keep a diary. But ever since she remembered her past life, she began to be afraid to write down her thoughts and thought that someone would read the diary, so she stopped doing it altogether. After this, the young lady opens her diary and wonders what her last entry was about. However, when the young lady opens it, she sees that this is not her handwriting, but it says that with her power, the girl gives life to many people. The main character is a little shocked by this, wondering if someone has read her diary. And after all, as she thought, it was a smart move to stop keeping a diary as soon as her memories returned. But the little girl doesn't understand who read her notes because she wouldn't dare call it a joke. The girl understands that the book and money were not taken, so it is not a thief, and she thinks that it is difficult for her to take care of herself. And there they also write about saving others, but suddenly the main character hears someone coming in. The girl gets very scared and immediately begins to hide all her things back in the box, wondering who dared to break into the room without knocking. But it turns out to be only her brother. He asks what Dahlia is doing, and when the young lady looks at him, she sees that Haikon is well dressed, and he looks beautiful. But after the guy approaches the young lady, he then thinks that he is simply criminally handsome. The main character thinks whether it can really be said that this is the appearance of a 16-year-old teenager, and the guy just looks at the book in her hands and asks what it is. The little girl immediately hides the diary, shut you up and thinks it's a bummer. However, Haikon after this only asks if she really thinks that he is interested in her diary. After the young lady finally puts the diary back, she turns to her brother and asks what brought him here. But the guy just holds out his hand and claims that it's time for them to move forward. Therefore, he suggests going to the ballroom. The main character then only asks if Miss Masha has already come, and the guy sighs excessively and contentedly, and addresses the baby by her full name. Then he claims that he is her partner, so he should take her to the point. And the main character then thinks whether he said that he will lead her and doesn't even understand what she should do because it will be wildly strange. The young lady understands that she should not show him her dissatisfied face, so they decide to smile, but the guys only once again offer to go, after which the main character extends her hand to her brother and says that she is so happy, but the young man says that there is no need to stick. Afterwards, they enter the ballroom where everything is decorated and there are many people. The main character looks around and thinks that this is her first score, and the heart beats wildly. But then the young lady looks at the interior of the room and thinks how beautiful it is there. But suddenly someone approaches his lordship and thanks him for the invitation. Dahlia thinks that he is still the main star of the ball and the popularity itself, as well as the main character, has not yet appeared. But suddenly the baby sees the Duchess of Bluefort and the woman notices the baby. He waves to her. Dahlia does the same in response, and then the woman comes a little closer to them. She turns to the Duke and tells him to accept her recovery. Hikan thanks her, and the woman says that she hopes in the future he will take care of his lovely little sister. The guy says that, of course, and when the Duchess leaves, he says that it looks like she plans to return. The main character then looks at her brother and claims that even that is true. But then the girl doesn't understand why he fell silent. Hikan claims that the first composition will begin soon. The young lady then remembers that the teacher said that as a rule, the first dance is usually danced with your partner. Therefore, the main character wonders if her brother really wants her to not go anywhere and dance with him. Hikan then only looks away and tells her not to pretend to be stunned, and the girl thinks that this is true, and since they are partners, although she did not expect to hear such a thing from Hikan, it should be normal. Suddenly, someone approaches the guy and tells his lordship that he is certainly pleased to hear this. However, due to problems with the orchestra, the first composition will not be performed until an hour later. The guy only answers this coldly and briefly, which is understandable. After this, the guy says that then the baby can take a little walk and just don't leave the ballroom. After all, he still needs to introduce her to Adelicia Benitez, and the young lady thinks that she hasn't come yet, and then agrees with her brother. And the guy, following her with his eyes, then turns around and leaves. The main character immediately after this resorts to the Duchess, and then thanks her for coming such a long way, and she is so happy. The woman then just grins and says that she promised. Then she claims that she heard that the baby finally had a maid of honor, and the girl replies that yes, and she was told that this is Lady Adelicia Benitez, and perhaps the Duchess are familiar with her. The woman claims that she has never heard of this name before, and the main character then says that it is clear that the Duchess claims that, however, she has not appeared in high society for a long time. After which they continue their conversation about the woman then claims that, by the way, although she only found out about it yesterday, His Highness the Second Prince has disappeared again. The young lady realizes that this is one of the two sons of the Emperor, namely Cedric. He was not the love interest in the labyrinth of Ouroboros, but during the events of the game he was in the stage of magical awakening, and no words are enough to describe all his beauty. There are even rumors that he has a real fan club in the palace, and many female fans even ask to create a separate route for him. The Duchess says that I wonder how long they will look for him this time, and the main character thinks that, however, Cedric also has an annoying habit of running away. So sometimes those around him have nothing but problems. The young lady then says that it must be difficult for His Majesty now, and the woman asks her if the girl wants to bet on when he will be found. The little one replies that yes, and that sounds fun. A short time later, the Duchess turns to the little girl and says that maybe it would be better if she talked to other people. Dahlia says that of course it's true, but it's much more fun with the Duchess. The girl understands that if she starts a conversation with someone, he will turn out to be as dangerous as Hikan, who will only get worse. But suddenly the main character notices how some kind of crowd has gathered there, and the Duchess asks what is happening there. The young lady then wonders if Adelicia has really come, but because of this crowd she doesn't see anything at all. The woman says how strange it is, and the little girl doesn't understand what she's talking about, but the Duchess then asks what brought the Emperor there. Dahlia, looking in that direction, really sees the Emperor and wonders why he suddenly came there. After which, the girl makes her way through the crowd and thinks that he didn't tell them that he was coming. When the little girl finally made her way through all these people, she sees the Emperor. Acerasa thinks that this is her first meeting with the male protagonist from the original route, not counting Hikan. But although the guy looks so kind, there is a perverted monster hiding inside him. The young man is also a prodigy who has already managed to awaken his power and is a transcendent with the powers of a saint. The girl thinks that he has not left the country yet and is playing the role of the Emperor's servant. But the young lady then wonders if he is up to something, but then the young lady sees someone else in front of her and is very surprised. After all, it turns out to be Adelicia Benitez. The main character then thinks in shock that who would have thought that in one day she would see almost all the game characters, and her heart couldn't stand it. But then the young lady's brother turns to Dahlia Pesteros. It seems as if he has called the little girl a couple of times already. The young lady then apologizes to her brother, and then the two of them approach His Majesty, and they thank him for coming. The man responds by simply waving his hand, and Hikon then asks why he arrived there without warning. The emperor then states that, of course, in order to congratulate Hikon on accepting the title. But then he claims that he would like to say so, but thought that the idiot Cedric might show up there. In the meantime, let the guy hold it, after which the guy standing next to the emperor hands the duke some kind of paper. And the main character, looking at her, thinks that this should be a congratulatory letter. The emperor then claims that they can be free, but let Adelicia greet Lady Dahlia, after which she approaches the baby and greets her, claiming that she is Delicia from the poor Viscounty Benitez, and if the girl allows, she will join her later. The young lady then says yes with a smile on her face, and she herself thinks that this woman is too beautiful, but the girl still thinks why in Adelicia's deep eyes. Only impenetrable darkness is visible. The girl was raised as a mercenary within the walls of the criminal world, and since the Transcendents were on her heels, there was nothing left for the girl except to extend a hand to them, and she is a true saint. But despite this, Adelicia herself was unhappy until the very end, so the young lady doesn't even know if she can do anything. To help a woman overcome future obstacles, however, she wants to be her strength. A little time later, the baby sees Atsera standing nearby, and when he looks closer, he wonders what he's doing. The guy takes a glass of champagne in his hands and points it towards the light. After this, swirl the glass a little more. He puts it back, and the main character thinks whether he has always been so strange, and whether this guy will really become the same as her brother. But suddenly someone turns to the young lady and asks if she can have a minute. It turns out to be the emperor, and he says that he is extremely embarrassed to tell her about this, but he heard that Cedric was hiding somewhere there, and therefore, if the girl doesn't mind, he would like to take him home. Hikon just looks at the emperor coldly and then sighs and tells him to do what he wants. The blonde then thanks the guy, and then uses his powers. The main character, noticing this, thinks that the air around them suddenly became heavier. The emperor claims that this will not affect them in any way, so the little girl doesn't have to worry, because in order to hide, the guy probably used magic, so he will track the consumption of the charge of this magic and will be able to find Cedric if he searches through the energy flow. The baby thinks that he speaks as if it were so simple, but managing magical energy in such a large space requires skill. The emperor then sniffs something and heads towards one of the servants, after which he says that this is where Cedric ended up. The young man then dispels his magic and says that for some reason his father was delayed this time. This turns out to be the second prince of the Frederick Empire, Cedric. The man at the same moment turns to his son and calls Togo a brat because he is a disgrace to the entire imperial family. So let him keep his mouth shut and follow him. The boy then does so with a smile on his face, and the emperor, passing near Hikon, also smiles and says that they will leave them, so they ask for forgiveness for the inconvenience caused. And Cedric then greets Hikonchik and says that everything would be fine, if only that asshole Acerus hadn't spilled the beans. However, the emperor only screams for Cedric to silently follow him, after which the guy sighs and goes to his father. The main character thinks that everything is just like in the game. After all, although Acerus looks like an angel, in reality he and Cedric do not get along at all. The young lady then realizes that, to be honest, Cedric is a real handsome man. He is a transcendental and the son of an emperor, but unlike Hikon and the other love interests in the original, he wasn't obsessed with Adelicia, although that may be why they didn't create a separate route for him. Suddenly, the main character notices how the guy is looking at her and immediately covers his eyes with his hands in shock. The girl then realizes what she did and thinks how stupid she is and why she just closed her eyes. But after the girl looks at the young man again, he just smiles and asks if she is Hikon's younger sister. The girl then tries to answer, but the emperor only screams for Cedric to move. And the guy, hearing this, nevertheless turns around and goes to his father, claiming to his majesty that he is already running, after which he tells Hikonchik that they will see each other again. The main character then thinks that they have left and that she and her brother now look like a couple exhausted after the emperor. Hikon turns to the young lady and offers to dance sometime later, and the girl then agrees. However, at this moment he approaches them, Adelicia, and addresses Lady Dahlia as well as His Grace the Duke of Pesteros. The main character understands that this is Adelicia and thinks that she really promised to return a little later. The woman then claims that from now on, she will be a maid of honor and a young lady. Therefore, he is entrusted to her care. The baby then realizes in shock that she didn't notice this before, and he thinks how Hikon reacted to the meeting with the main character. However, when the little girl looks at her brother, she sees that he is looking at her and wonders why he is staring like that. The guy then asks if the little girl likes the maid of honor, and the main character thinks in shock what he is talking about. The girl looks a little more in shock at her brother. And then he immediately starts shaking his head and says that of course not, and she's just great. Hikon then says that's great and then turns around and leaves. The little girl in shock thinks whether this situation is not different from the original, and is her brother really indifferent to Adelicia? But the girl understands that if Hikon is not obsessed with Adelicia, then the story will not advance. This means that the young lady will definitely be able to survive, but suddenly the girl realizes that she is not alone there. Therefore, the little girl asks Lady Adelicia for forgiveness, because for a moment, she thought about her own things. The woman tells Lady Dahlia not to worry because if she is unhappy with her, she will try to fix it. The main character thinks how she can be, because this woman is too beautiful. But the girl thinks how it could be otherwise. However, then the little girl realizes that she still didn't answer, so she immediately grabs the girl's hands and screams that no, and how can she be dissatisfied with her? Because the little girl is very happy that she came there. The main character then asks to call her simply Dahlia, and the woman watches how the baby picked her up by the hands and then addresses the main character. And with a smile on her face, she thanks Dahlia for these words and asks to address her informally. The young lady thinks that even though the woman is her maid of honor and they have only known each other for a day, she is very happy. But then the little girl remembers the Duchess and after that turns to Adelicia. And she says that if Adelicia doesn't mind, she would like to introduce her to the Duchess of Bluefort. The woman then says that of course she doesn't mind. And the main character, heading to the Duchess, thinks that she loves both of them. So it would be great to become not friends. But the entire Duchess will definitely like Adelicia. After looking around a little, the girl notices a woman and turns to her. But the Duchess does not look very well. Beads of cold sweat run down her face, and then the glass falls from the woman's hands. The main character immediately runs up to her ladyship and asks if everything is okay and if she was hurt. However, the woman only breathes heavily and when the baby puts her hand on her. Then the Duchess immediately beats her off and tells Dahlia to get away from her now. The main character tries to object, but her maid of honor grabs the girl and tells her to stop. After all, the Duchess is all ready, but the young lady then wonders if the woman is falling into madness. But the little girl does not understand why she is, and why now. After all, until now there has not been a single sign, but the little girl then realizes in shock that this is not so. And it was she who ignored the truth, because the young lady does not know at what reception the incident occurred during which the Transcendental went mad. And why not a word will be said about the Duchess after 4 years, and her son became the head of the family. Dahlia realizes that she has been given many clues. And there was an incident that marked the beginning of the main plot and changed the fate of the remaining Transcendents, and consequently the Duchess of Bluefort was distraught at the reception. Hikon immediately runs up to them and orders the servant to immediately bring His Highness there. When everyone immediately starts running somewhere, the main character thinks that the only way to stop the maddened Transcendental is to plunge him into eternal sleep. But then the little girl remembers the Duchess's warm smile. And at this time, the woman touches the shield, and one of the people trying to escape immediately hits something. But when he touches something in front of him, he asks where it's coming from, and there's a wall there and screams that they're trapped. Hikon understands that thanks to her strength, the Duchess of Bluefort creates the strongest barriers, and since she falls into madness, her strength turns against them. Adelicia then asks when His Majesty will move, and the guy claims that he will be there in a minute. And the woman then nods and then turns to Dahlia and says that she must have been very scared. Adelicia also asks if she is okay and claims that she will monitor the condition of the Duchess, so she asks the girl to quickly run away from there and hide. The main character then turns to Adelicia and says in a shaking voice that then it's her. However, the woman just turns around and claims with a smile on her face that she will be fine. Hikon then calls his sister and tells her to come to him because it's too dangerous there. And the main character looking at him just bites her lip. The baby remembers the lines written in her diary that her touch will bring salvation, and the writer hopes that with her power she will give life to many people, so the baby thinks if she can fix something before everything gets worse. However, the Duchess suddenly turns to her, and then he asks if they could talk a little. The main character immediately remembers how she was a baby and how the woman took care of her. Therefore, the girl does not even know what to do, and at this time the Emperor arrives in the hall. He runs to Haikon, and the guy turns to His Majesty. The Emperor asks why the Duchess of Bluefort fell into madness because she had recently been in perfect order, but suddenly they hear some noise, and then see that it is the Duchess. Adelicia realizes that things are bad, and Haikon then immediately rushes out of his place and heads to his sister, after which he grabs the baby by the hand. But when the guy does this, Dahlia only pushes him away, causing the guy to fall back. And the baby, just with a smile on her face, seems to be saying something to her brother. The Emperor then immediately grabs the guy by the hand and pulls him towards him. Then he tries to cover the shockwave with his cloak. He turns to Haikon and screams whether he has gone crazy, because once he gets into the barrier, he will immediately plunge into eternal sleep. But he has not even gone through the awakening stage. But the guy only screams out his sister's name again and tries to escape from the Emperor's hands. But when the young man sees the barrier, he clenches his fists and thinks why the girl, when she let him go, said that she was fine. While the young man is thinking about this, someone informs His Majesty that the wall surrounding the building has disappeared, and the Emperor says that this is excellent, and in this case, let them immediately begin the evacuation, after which the man takes his sword in his hands, and he tries to cut through the barrier, but when he swings the ball, he sees that there isn't even a crack left there. The blonde claims that they will just have to break through this barrier and save those two. The main character, at this time being inside the barrier, says that just a little more, and she wonders if she is inside the barrier created by the Duchess of Bluefort. The baby was worried that it would be difficult for her if she were inside, but fortunately she was not hurt at all, and even her arms and legs are still in place. The main character thinks that Adelicia must be out there somewhere and she must find her, after which the baby looks around and begins her journey. The girl remembers how her brother tried to save her, and she didn't expect that he would try to do this. Continuing on her way, the little girl thinks that she is curious what Haikon is thinking about now. Well, then she sees a lady with black hair, and when the woman turns around and sees Dahlia, he immediately runs up to her and asks how she ended up there and if she was hurt anywhere. The brunette also apologizes and says that she had to protect Dahlia. Well, the little girl with a smile on her face says that everything is fine, and she is glad to see that Adelicia is alive and well. And besides, it doesn't seem to her that this place is dangerous, but the woman claims that this is not so, and everything is the other way around. After all, with every second this barrier becomes smaller. The main character then, in shock, asks if this is being said seriously. The woman replies that yes, and his walls are gradually shrinking. The girl then thinks that they will simply be crushed, and this is already serious. The brunette tells the little girl to calm down because they will definitely find a way out, after which she begins to think about something. The main character then says that if they still haven't found a way out, then why don't they find the Duchess of Bluefort? The woman then thinks about what the baby is talking about, and Dahlia says that if the barrier continues to decrease, then in the end they will find her and also a solution to the problem. Adelicia then just nods and they head off to search. As the brunette follows the young lady, she looks at her from behind while her heart beats a little faster. The little girl thinks she wonders what the Duchess is like now, and when she comes a little closer, she sees her. A woman stands in the middle of the barrier without her mask and looks into the distance, after which she turns to the young lady and smiles bitterly. The main character immediately wants to run up to her ladyship in excitement, but the brunette tells her to wait if Dahlia comes too close. However, the Duchess does not give it to the young lady. Finish and says, what does she mean, Lady Adelicia Benitez? But how unfortunate it is that they met under such circumstances. The woman then looks a little sadly at the floor and claims that she created this place in order to restrain her powers and make it impossible to penetrate these walls. But anyone except her is capable of leaving them, and the main character then turns to her ladyship and asks how she is. But the woman claims that the distraught soul is not allowed to become the same, and she intends to stay there until the very end. The main character then looks at the Duchess in shock, and then turns to Lady Adelicia, and she says that until she completely loses her mind, she would like to spend her last moments with Dahlia. So she asks if their girlfriend could leave them, but the woman wonders if it's worth doing. And the main character just grabs her hand and screams that she will be okay. After which, Adelicia closes her eyes and says that it's good, and in this case she will leave to report the situation to His Majesty. And finally, stroking the baby's hands, she says that they will see each other soon. The Duchess turns to Dahlia and invites her to sit down. When they do this, the woman turns to the baby, and she apologizes for the fact that, despite her concern, everything ended this way. The main character then just shakes her head and tries not to cry, and the woman looks at her with a slight smile and says that even if this is their last conversation, she doesn't care. However, then a sharp pain pierces the Duchess's chest and she apologizes, claiming that it looks like she doesn't have much time left. Dahlia is very worried about her, and the woman then turns to the baby, and she says that before she told her that transcendents are forced to eke out a lonely and tormenting existence, and asks if the baby remembers. The Duchess claimed that she too was filled with endless anxiety and worried that one day her power would consume everything around her. Because she had no one to share her worries with, the pain only grew. But then the woman met her, a kind, strong, loving, and slightly timid but wonderful child. And spending time with her, the woman felt less lonely each time. Therefore, she wants to believe that the young lady's brother, Duke Pesteros, will soon begin to change too. However, the fact that she will not see this is truly unfortunate. The woman says this with a smile on her face about the main character, and then cannot hold back her tears. And she thinks that she really cannot change anything. Duchess Bluefort said that she would save everyone, but the maddened Transcendental would never be the same again, and if the original plot remained unchanged. The girl thinks whether she will Haikon is the villain and the future of Adelicia. The baby's tears are tinged with pain and continue to flow from her eyes. And the little girl holding out her hand thinks that, however, right now, she wants to say goodbye to the Duchess with dignity. The woman then remembers the touch of the girl when she was very little, and the main character thanks the woman and says that the Duchess Bluefort replaced her mother. The baby with tears in her eyes says that she really loves her very much, but suddenly some kind of light begins to appear, and the barrier around these two simply disappears. Everyone is in complete shock from this, and the Duchess then falls on the young lady's shoulder. After this, the Emperor immediately runs up to her. But after examining the woman, he claims in shock that she simply lost consciousness, despite the fact that the Duchess almost turned into a berserker. But now her emotional background is normal. Adelicia then, in complete shock, asks whether transcendental madness can disappear so easily. The Emperor then claims that this incident should remain only between them and asks if everyone is clear, but then someone screams out the name Dahlia. It turns out Haikon. He immediately runs up to the baby and asks if she was hurt, and if she was injured anywhere. Then the main character sees her brother's excitement and only waves her head in surprise, and the guy then asks why she but still can't finish. The young lady then touches his face or asks if his brother was really worried about her. This makes the guy a little wary, and then grabs the baby by the shoulder, but when the girl met a little, answer her in pain. Then he immediately removes his hand and apologizes. Then the Emperor addresses them, and he claims that he is taking the Duchess Bluefort with her because now she needs rest. The baby, then worried about the woman, asks if she is okay, and the Emperor says that everything worked out thanks to her, and it seems that the Duchess's immense love for her. He revealed a previously unknown miracle to this world. The main vision then, with tears of joy in his eyes, thinks that everything worked out, after which she immediately runs up to her brother and hugs him tightly. The girl, crying, thinks that she is so happy and her heart is relieved. The young man puts his hand on her back, hugging her back. After this, the Emperor enters his carriage and thinks that he cannot believe it. After all, from the madness of the Duchess, there was not a trace left of Bluefort. And as he thought, it didn't seem to him then. After all, Lady Dahlia has the extraordinary power to calm the raging power transcendence. Well, the Emperor doesn't know where or how she got this ability, but if the girl is on their side, then perhaps they will be able to get rid of the only weakness of the Empire. However, when the guy said goodbye to the baby and said that he would like to know more about what happened, the man then asked that as soon as everything calms down, could she come to the palace. The little girl then just waved her head, and the Emperor thanked her, after which he extended his hand for a handshake, and when the baby took his hand, then he immediately asked if she had still thought about his engagement proposal. The main character then thinks in shock what he is talking about, and the man tells her not to worry because he was just joking, after which he waved his hand and said that I'll see you soon. The man understands that her face alone shows that the girls really like talking about engagement, and even the power of cleansing has weakened. Therefore, it seems that her ability directly depends on the emotions that the girl experiences for the person. And if the emperor's theory is correct, then now it will be better to show her yourself in the best light. However, the guy thinks that with the exception of the Duchess Bluefor, almost all transcendents are real owners, and if they become aware that Dahlia is capable of purifying souls, so there will certainly be those who want to make her theirs, after which chaos will arise in the empire. Hey, the man thinks that perhaps he will tell Hikan everything about you. The time is right. In the meantime, he can entrust Adelicia with taking care of Lady Dahlia, after which he turns to the brunette and tells the whole story. The woman, having listened to him, says that it is clear, and the emperor claims that from now on she will protect Lady Dahlia as a maid of honor. The woman then says that it will be done, and the emperor then smiles and asks what she thinks of Lady Dahlia after their first meeting. Adelicia claims that the girl is kind, unshakable, and strong, and also simply incredible. So it would be wonderful if they were a little closer. 2 days later, in the chambers of the imperial palace, the Duchess finally woke up. The emperor, who was nearby, immediately asked if she had woken up and how she was feeling. After all this, he claims that he would like the woman to keep Lady Dahlia's abilities a secret. The Duchess then says that yes, and she thinks that it will be better this way. She remembers how the little girl hugged her in tears, and now she claims that because this girl is her precious friend. The emperor then rises from his seat and states that he is glad that they have reached a consensus. However, he asks if the Duchess doesn't think that she should return to her lands. The woman understands that such a case, when a transcendental person overcomes madness, will undoubtedly become the topic of gossip and headlines for newspapers. And now the Duchess says that he is right, and as soon as she sees Dahlia, she will immediately return. The emperor then smiles and then leaves the room. In the corridor, he meets Atsaras and says that since the Duchess has woken up, it's worth sending a servant to her. The man then remains silent for a while, and the emperor turns to him, asking if he heard him at all. The guy then realizes that His Highness has addressed him and asks for forgiveness. The blonde then puts his hand on his shoulder and tells him to get distracted. It's a big surprise. But upon touching, I realized that he was not planning anything. But when Atsaras sees that His Highness has left, he immediately changes his gaze and thinks what happened to the Duchess of Bluefor. Because when the barrier collapsed, she was next to her. It is Dahlia Pisteros that the man then understands, that he must find out everything as soon as possible, and heads down the corridor. The next day, the main character thinks that because of the visit to the palace, she is all on pins and needles. But suddenly, the girl hears rumors that the Transcendental Man managed to stop his transformation into a berserker. These turn out to be servants from the palace, and one of them asks if it is true that no one was hurt, and this has never happened before. A little time later, the main character already comes to the Emperor's office, and he says that it must have been difficult for Lady Dahlia to come there, after which he tells the girl to sit down and asks if she wants a cake. The main character then thanks him a little in shock. And then there's a slightly awkward atmosphere between them. After this, the Emperor turns to the young lady and asks if she is ready to tell him everything. The girl just nods and then claims that when the Duchess said that she wanted to talk to her for the last time, then she met her in the very center of the barrier. And when they finished, she hugged her, and at that moment a blindingly bright light suddenly appeared, after which the Duchess of Bluefort came to her senses. The Emperor then claims that the more details he learns, the more incredible everything seems. And the little girl then claims that, however, something haunts her. And this is why the Duchess so suddenly fell into madness, because aren't the souls of transcendence usually destroyed gradually? The man claims that this is a good question, and in fact he himself are concerned about it. So right now the Duchy of Bluefort and the imperial family are conducting a joint investigation. Therefore, Lady Dahlia need not worry. And after this, the Emperor claims that he has something else. After which he claims that he would like to thank the young lady, and if she worries about anything, then she should definitely tell him. Because even if she just wants to chat, then let her come to the palace. The main character is then in shock, wondering if it was possible and wondering if they are laughing at her. The man then claims that it is possible for the little girl to believe him, he should issue her a pass. But then silence still hangs between them a little time later. The main character is already holding in her hands the official pass to the imperial palace. The little girl smiles and thanks the Emperor, and then the man smiles back. And he says that now the time has come. Then the young lady hears a knock on the door. This turns out to be the Duchess of Bluefort. The main character of the video, a woman, immediately runs up to her and hugs her tightly. The girl says that she was so worried about the Duchess, and the woman then apologizes. A short time later, sitting on the sofa, they are having a conversation. The Duchess claims that she is returning to her estate. So she thinks that after everything that happened, she thinks it would be better to pass on her title to her son. And the main character then thinks that even though the Duchess of Bluefort survived, but Livaine Bluefort will soon acquire the ducal title anyway, and Duchess Bluefort herself will go far, far away. The woman then turns to the baby and says that the next time they meet, she called her Maria because she would no longer be the Duchess of Bluefort. The girl is a little surprised by this, and the woman asks if it's a simple name and that's why she was silent about it. The Duchess thinks that Dahlia is one of the most dear people to her, so as soon as everything is resolved, she will often visit the capital, and hope that the next time they meet, they will both be happy. As a result, the Duchess of Bluefort returned to her country estate, and the young lady's life without her faded significantly. However, she made a friend who filled this void, and now the young lady hears someone knocking on the room. It turns out to be Adelicia. She turns to Dahlia and says that today the weather is simply wonderful. The main character is very happy about the arrival of her friend and then offers to drink a cup of tea. The girl understands that since Adelicia officially became her maid of honor and began to frequently visit the Duchy of Pesteros, and just the thought that a girl can see how her favorite heroine lives makes her incredibly happy. But Adelicia still has to overcome a lot of difficulties and pain on her life's journey, so the girl thinks that she is glad that she can support her. Then the little girl turns to her friend and asks how she can be so beautiful. Adelicia is a little embarrassed by this and says that according to her, Dahlia is much more beautiful. The girl then thinks that she will be much nicer to her than to Haikon and says that she loves Adelicia so much. The young lady realizes that she has never had friends the same age before, so she is glad that she made friends with Adelicia. The brunette then says that as far as she can tell, Lady Peggy is simply crazy about Prince Leonard. The main character then says in surprise that she didn't expect him to be so popular and saw him only once. Well, he's not her type at all. The brunette then asks when Dahlia saw him, and the girl realizes that she accidentally spilled the beans. The girl thinks that she only saw him in the game but never met him in person, and his face is so-so. Then the little girl claims that there are simply a lot of rumors about him, and the brunette then asks really and says that although in fact he is not her type either. After which the two of them laugh heartily, after which Adelicia turns to Dahlia. And she asks me if she really likes such stories. The main character then asks why. And the woman says that it's just that usually when she talks about something like that, in the opinion of others, she is minding her own business. And it even happened that he would get angry with her, and the main character would then scream in shock who dared to do this. And Adelicia claims that this is why she rarely opens up to other people. Dahlia thinks that this is logical, and since the girl grew up as a mercenary, and if she lived completely alone, it would not be easy for her to trust others. Now the little girl thinks that the girl is such a kind and vulnerable person, after which she puts her hand on Adelicia's and says that she will always be by her side. The girl is a little surprised by this, but then softens her gaze a little, and with a smile on his face, he thanks Dahlia. The little girl thinks how beautiful the lady is, and now she understands why many of the heroes of the story fell under her spell. After all, if you think about it, Adelicia and Acarus serve the Emperor, but the young lady does not understand what connects them and judging by the original story. The girl often argued with Acarus. She claimed that she believed that he could change. And the young lady realizes that over time, however, she began to be attracted to him, and the little girl wonders if she can ask about it. After which he finally decides to do it and says that during the ball, Adelicia was served with the Emperor. There was a young man with brown hair and green eyes. The brunette then asks if the girl is talking about Acarus, and the main character asks if she is close with him. Adelicia claims that they are just acquaintances, and then asks why the baby is interested. The girl then says that she was just curious and thinks that it's nice because Acarus is a dangerous character, so she hopes that Adelicia will stay away from him. But suddenly, the main character hears someone calling her name, and it is a very familiar voice. After the baby turns around, she sees her brother there. When the guy approaches, Adelicia gets up from her seat and says that she is glad to meet his lordship. The guy just turns to Lady Benitez and claims that it is already late, so he believes that it is time for her to go. The main character then looks a little puzzled at her maid of honor, and she just smiles at her. And then he asks if she can visit Dahlia tomorrow. The baby says of course and then says goodbye to her. Adelicia tightly. And her brother, noticing this, only looks away, and a little time later when the brunette sets off in a carriage. The main character looks after her and thinks that 3 weeks have passed since Adelicia became her maid of honor. But Haikon hardly spoke a few words to her. There's not even a smell of mad love there. The young lady's brother then turns to her and says that the girl is a very flighty person, and Dahlia should be careful because Adelicia's every action Benitez was dictated by imperial decree. The main character then looks at her brother and wonders if he takes the brunette for an enemy. But then the little girl looks away and claims that Adelicia is a good friend. And after the departure of the Duchess of Bluefort, she had no friends left. The guy then looks nervously, and then he turns to the young lady and says that since she is Pesteros, she will still have friends. After which he says that they met only 3 weeks ago and have already become so close. And having said this, he turns around and leaves. And the main character thinks why he came there and whether it was to send Adelicia away. But the little girl still thinks that Haikon seems to have changed a little. The main character thinks that after the incident with the Duchess of Bluefort, her brother finally became kinder. And he even opens doors for her and humbly accompanies her. And he also gives her his hand when the baby gets into the carriage. And the young lady wonders if he really feels guilty for not being able to protect her during the fall. But the girl understands that she should think about it. At the next tea party, Adelicia claims that in a month there will be a ball at the Imperial Palace, and the girl asks if this is true. The brunette claims that they say it will be dedicated to the Crown Prince's birthday, and asks if this will not be the young lady's first reception outside the estate. The little girl replies that yes, and the woman then claims that she thinks it would be nice if Dahlia had a tea party before the reception, because it would be better to make new acquaintances before that event. The girl then asks if Adelicia will come if she invites her. The brunette then says that it's natural, and the little girl, starting to eat her dessert, thinks that if she makes friends at the reception, it will be more fun. And besides, their pastry chef's delicious desserts are undoubtedly a treat for everyone. Well, the girl then asks if she should tell her brother about this. Adelicia says that of course he can send out invitations there. The main character asks if she really thinks so, and the girl replies that of course I am Haikon too, and they will never refuse because... But then Adelicia stops her story and looks at the maid behind her, after which he leans over to the young lady and whispers in her ear that the Duke himself does not understand how much he adores Dahlia, and because she is close to her, he is wildly jealous. The main character then thinks in shock that this simply cannot be, but if you remember, the guy claimed that they met only 3 weeks ago and had already become close, and the girl thinks that he is definitely jealous. The young lady even then thinks that her brother is still a cutie, and does this really mean that her efforts have finally borne fruit? And the girl thinks that if she saves money, it will become easier to leave the estate, but Dahlia wonders if everything will be okay, because until that moment she was only thinking about herself. However, the little girl thinks about what to do with Haikon and the others. Now the girl is knocking on her brother's room, and then the guy, Sleepy, comes out, opens the door and tells her to come in. After the little girl enters the room, she sees mountains of documents on the table and thinks that it looks like he has a lot to do. And yet, being a duke is not easy. Then the guy sits down at his desk and starts working. Then the main character thinks that he is working at an alarming speed. Haikon then asks what brought her there, and the girl thinks how she can tell such a busy person. That she wants to have a tea party, so the little girl says that it's nothing and she just misses her brother. The guy claims that if it concerns her tea party, then he has already taken care of everything and she can contact the butler for details. Dahlia is then a little surprised and then asks her brother how he knew. She soon denies that the maid overheard her conversation with Lady Benitez and reported the conversation to him. The main character remembers this maid and then remains silent a little awkwardly, after which he turns to his brother and apologizes, after which he says that he must be busy. But the guy claims that this is not important and is a mere trifle. The baby then just smiles and then gets up from her seat. Then he goes up to his brother and thanks him. The guy claims that it's already late, so let her go to bed. The main character agrees, but then asks if she can stay with him for a while longer, and the guy says that she should do as she wants. The baby is very happy about this, after which she pulls another chair and places it next to her brother. But as she climbs onto the chair, the girl thinks that the table seems too high. Haikon, looking at her, believes that the girl was not tall enough for his workplace, and the main character says that it means he has always been so tall, but the guy claims that even at her age, he was much taller. The baby then notices a slight smile on her brother's face, and because of this, she herself cannot help but smile, after which the two of them, while at the table, go about their business. A short time later, the guy fills out another document, but then he notices something. And looking to the side, he sees that his sister has already fallen asleep. The guy thinks that she looks like a pig, but then he thinks that she is just a short time ago. He was all alone for himself, but then the little girl sided with him, and no matter how badly he treated her, the girl still did not back down. Therefore, the young man thinks why everything turned out this way. At this time, the maid enters the room and excitedly apologizes to his lordship, but claims that Lady Dahlia has disappeared. But then she sees the girl in the Duke's office, and he screams in shock whether she was there all the time. The guy then gets up from his seat, and he claims that he tried to wake her up, but it seems that she only fell asleep more deeply. But the guy realizes that in fact he didn't even try, after which he claims that he will take Dahlia to her chambers. And a little time later, the young man leaves his sister on the bed and remembers the words of the emperor. The blonde claimed that the life of a transcendent is very lonely, but the young man now thinks that it's strange. However, he no longer feels like one. The next day, the main character wakes up and thinks in shock, how could she possibly fall asleep there? But her cheek spread across the table and she still hadn't let go. Hikon must have had a good laugh at her, but the girl thinks that this is at least some kind of variety in his dull life. A few days later, replies to her invitations finally arrived, and the little girl thinks that that's why they are pisteros, because all those invited responded positively. The young lady says they will arrive with their mothers, and Adelicia claims that it cannot be otherwise, because each of them wants to meet the baby after that. She points to one of the nicknames and says that she heard this lady was close to Dahlia's mother, the previous Duchess of Pesteros, and she also wanted her daughter to become the young lady's maid of honor. The main character asks if it's true because she didn't know, and Adelicia says that in fact many ladies wanted to take the place of her maid of honor and she is glad that she became her. The main character then claims that she is also glad that Adelicia is now with her. The girl smiles in response to this and immediately hugs Dahlia, after which he turns to her and says how happy she is that they are together. The young lady thinks the girl is like a puppy. A short time later, the day of tea comes and the little girl greets Madame Patricia and Lady Rose, and then thanks them for coming. The woman then tells her daughter to just listen because Lady Dahlia knows her name. The main character thinks that they are so happy, and it's good that she listened to Adelicia and remembered their names. After which another woman comes and asks to forgive her because this is their first meeting, so she asks to be allowed to introduce herself and says that her name is Lady Henry. And Dahlia understands that here is Madame Henry, whom Adelicia was talking about. And the young lady greets her, claiming that she is glad to meet you. But now the main character thinks that as soon as the tea party began, the girls immediately began to offer the young lady joint activities. The main character claims that this is a great idea and it should be interesting, so she and Adelicia, well, the young lady does not have time to finish her sentence. How one of the women turns to her and claims that what a pity this is. After all, if she chose her daughter who was trained to be a maid of honor as her companion, then she definitely wouldn't worry about anything. Adelicia, hearing this, tenses up a little, and after that there is silence at the table. But then the brunette gets up from the table and asks for forgiveness, but claims that she is forced to take her leave. The main character grabs her maid of honor by the hand and looks at her worriedly. The girl whispers that everything is fine. When Adelicia leaves, people at the table immediately begin to whisper. One of the women claims that she must admit that she is a little disappointed that Lady Pesteros's maid of honor was a girl from the Benitez house. And another woman claims that they say the girl is ready to do anything to win the favor of His Majesty. Another woman thinks Lady Dahlia should know about this. And the main character thinks that Adelicia just left, so the girl claims that they are mistaken and Adelicia is not like that at all. And she is also grateful that His Majesty chose her as her maid of honor. The woman then asks in shock if the lady is talking about His Highness. And the main character, with a smile on her face, replies that her mother did not have time to appoint her a maid of honor while she was alive. So His Majesty helped her with this. The woman who first started talking about Adelicia then gets a little embarrassed and says that it's understandable. The other ladies then say that they didn't even know that the Benitez family got along with the emperor. And the main character then claims that today she had a wonderful time, but this is where the tea party comes to an end. The event ended on an awkward note, and its rudeness made many people feel uncomfortable. Therefore, after tea, they constantly apologized. And when the young lady was convinced of the sincerity of their words, comfort and peace reigned around again. Now the young lady thinks that although it was not easy, she is happy that everything ended well. after which the baby sighs, but then someone turns to her and says that Dahlia protected her. It turns out to be Adelicia. She thanks the girl, and Dahlia smiles in response. A little time later, the brunette is already heading towards the carriage. The girl thinks that she is glad that Dahlia turned out to be such a wonderful person. Adelicia remembers her conversation with the emperor, and the blonde claimed that if a girl feels even the slightest attachment to a transcendental, she can heal his wounded soul with one touch, and by the time this becomes known, they must win Dahlia to their side. However, now the brunette thinks that she is obliged to protect Dahlia. A little time later, she is already in the palace. And when a girl enters one of the rooms, someone claims that they are glad to see her. It turns out to be His Majesty the Emperor, and the guy asks how Lady Dahlia is doing. The brunette then sits on the sofa and says that it's great, as always. The blonde then says if something happened now, it would be a disaster. Well, in any case, he wants the girl to do him a favor, because soon there will be a ball in the imperial palace, and during the reception he needs to introduce his son to Lady Dahlia. The guy states how he would like to introduce both princes, but that brat Cedric has escaped from the palace again. The brunette then claims that she will be from the moment he last ran away. A month has already passed, and His Highness then says that he is right on point. The girl then claims that during the ball, Lady Dahlia's partner will be the prince. The operator replies that no, and Hikan will never allow this. And the emperor then claims that it is Adelicia who will go to the ball with Leonard. The girl then asks if he is serious and thinks that it's not enough that she received the honor of becoming a lady-in-waiting of one of the 4 ducal houses, but now she also has to dance with the crown prince. The man claims that yesterday he assigned a new title to the Benitez family, and from now on the girl is the daughter of the count. Adelicia thinks why did he do this so suddenly and asks about it, and the man claims that Lady Dahlia visited him yesterday. The little girl insisted that Adelicia was a wonderful person and deserved to be treated properly, and the girl said this so boldly, but the emperor understands that he claimed that he understood her perfectly. However, he asked what he would get in return. The girl didn't even know what to answer then. But then she claimed that if this does not concern her engagement, then she is ready to fulfill any of his wishes. The emperor thought how cute she was and thought what a pity it was that he didn't have a daughter, after which he agreed and said that, in this case, he would grant the Benitez family the title of count. The young lady asked if it was true, and the guy then claimed that of course, and in return asked if she could hug him. The main character then wondered in shock why he asked for something so strange, but then she finally agreed, after which the baby hugged the emperor and the guy then felt that his mind is clearing and her affection seems to be growing. After meeting Dahlia, the blonde began to feel changes. His daily headaches disappeared and there was no trace of the desire to plunge into eternal sleep. Therefore, the guy thinks that it would be great for the girl to continue visiting him and now tells Adelicia that this is how it all happened. The girl is then a little embarrassed, and when she is about to leave, His Highness asks him to take care of his son at the ball. The girl then heads down the corridor and thinks about Dahlia, but the girl has done so much for her. But then someone passing by pushes her and Adelicia, then asks for forgiveness. However, when he turns around and sees Aceris's face there, the guy just smiles and then says that he hopes my lady wasn't hurt. The girl sighs and says that this is nothing, and Aceris then says that she probably arrived there because of the upcoming score. But then, seeing that the girl is not going to answer, he apologizes for the rudeness, but claims that he has to bow out and then leaves. The guy with a confident smile on his face thinks that he will soon meet Dahlia Pesteros. Indeed, on that day, the transformation of the Transcendent into a berserker suddenly stopped, and Dahlia was involved in this, so he needs to collect as much evidence as possible. Aceres, thinking about this, just smiles and continues on his way. A little time later, the main character is already preparing for the ball, and the maids say that their lady is simply beautiful. The main character is embarrassed by this, and a little later, going out into the corridor, she thinks that since the ball will be held in the imperial palace, they worked hard on her image. And although usually Hikan simply instructs the syllables to purchase all the most expensive things, but this time he personally chose the bracelet for her, and looking at him, the main character thinks, what do they say? This bracelet stands like a whole mansion, and the girl thinks what will happen if she loses it. But suddenly the little girl hears someone's steps, and when someone sees it, they are very surprised and admire the image. It turns out to be Adelicia. She smiles warmly at the young lady, and the main character immediately comes up to her and screams that Adelicia is simply beautiful. This makes the girl smile and claims that Dahlia is also incredibly beautiful. She also saw His Majesty and wanted to thank her. The girl says that this is nothing, and at this time the maid turns to her and asks if her lady could sit down for a while because she wants to fix her hair. A short time later, Dahlia is already sitting with Adelicia, and the brunette asks if her friend is worried, because today she will attend the ball in the palace for the first time. The main character says that as long as Adelicia is around, everything is fine, but then she asks, why didn't she go to His Highness and wouldn't he be her partner? But seeing the brunette's reaction, the main character thinks that she doesn't seem to like it. The young lady understands that Crown Prince Leonard was a good secondary character, but since he did not stand out in any way, he did not become one of the main male characters, and for the heroine he was rather a good friend. The brunette claims that she just needs to arrive at the palace an hour before the reception starts. And then she says that as far as she understands, the baby is dancing her first dance with the Duke, and the girl answers yes. And Adelicia then asks if she could give her second dance to her, and the main character then thinks that in this world girls are not forbidden to dance together. After which she claims that yes, and she will happily dance with her. Adelicia then says that by the way she has a gift for Dahlia, and the main character asks if she has a gift. The woman replies that yes, although to be precise, this is her gratitude, after which she hands over a box of gloves. The main character looks at them and the brunette claims that she carefully selected him and then asks if the girl likes it. Dahlia says they are beautiful, and then thanks Adelicia, after which the baby puts on gloves. And he says that they fit like a glove, and Adelicia, looking at the girl, takes her hand, and he claims that these gloves will certainly protect Dahlia. The main character smiles in response to this and says that she will take care of them. After that, they say goodbye, and the girl thinks that since Leonard was in the palace, Adelicia had to leave first, and she languished in anticipation of Haikon. Now, the main character thinks that after that incident when she fell asleep, they almost didn't see each other, and she'll be lucky if today they can exchange at least a couple of words. Well then, the girl sees that the guy has already arrived, and he is very well dressed. Dahlia thinks how handsome he is and then greets her brother. Well, he just remains silent and looks at his sister. The baby wonders why he's staring, and did he really realize all her beauty? But the guy claims that he was just surprised how short the girl is, and the main character then thinks what she was expecting. But the guy then extends his hand to her and invites her to go, and the main character, looking at her brother's handsome face, agrees, after which they go outside. The girl thinks, what if he scolds her for the problems that have arisen, after which she talks about that situation at the tea party and apologizes. The young lady's brother says that she is great, and the girl is surprised by this and asks what he is talking about. Well, the young man claims that despite the fact that the guests were rude, she was able to rein them in, and this is an excellent job. So he pats his little sister on the head and says she's smart, and the main character smiles in response to this, or a little time later they are already near the ballroom. She and her brother are welcomed with the rest of the aristocrats and then give gifts to their family. The girl claims that it seems that gifts have arrived there from all over the continent, and opening them will be very difficult, but she is still happy. But the girl then remembers something important and turns to her brother and asks when his birthday is. The guy then, in response to this, asks his own question, why does she need this, and claims that his birthday was in the winter. But don't let the baby worry, because the next one is still far away. The main character then wants to talk about her birthday, but the guy claims that it was in June and apologizes for not being able to congratulate her. The baby then asks in shock how he knew, but then someone addresses them. And he asks if this is Duke Pesteros. A couple of aristocrats then claim that they are honored to meet him, and the man then says that there are a lot of rumors about what happened at the title ceremony, and who would have thought that the Duchess of Bluefort. The man also claims that he hopes nothing will happen this time, and the woman then turns to the young lady and says that the rumors that are coming out that she is inseparable from her brother are true and the baby is so cute. Therefore, the Duke should be happy. The main character then thinks that they are a bit of a group, but since today is a holiday, she will have to keep quiet. After which the little girl says that yes, well, what if her brother turns to the Viscount and says that he would be better off keeping his filthy tongue shut? The man then looks at the Duke in shock and asks what he is talking about. Well, the brother of the main character says that even if every word he uttered turned out to be true. But why should they hear such things from them? And the main character, who guessed the okay, pulls her brother's clothes. After all, he thinks that it's been too long before he apologizes, and says that they are very sorry because they were wrong. The guy insists that in future they should be careful with their words. Then he turns around and tells Dahlia that they are leaving. Then they head away from these aristocrats. Then Haikun says that Dahlia should put it on her nose that her last name is Pesteros, so the girl should not tolerate such rude behavior. The main character then just giggles at this, and his brother asks why she is laughing. The little girl, with a smile on her face, says that when she saw her brother in anger, she remembered her behavior during the tea party. The guy then just looks at her silently, and the baby starts giggling again. When they are already in the ballroom, the little girl looks in shock at all the sweets and thinks how delicious everything looks. After which she turns to her brother and asks if she can eat. The guy tells her to do as she wants. And after that, the little girl already tries one of the desserts and thinks that this is such happiness, after which she turns to Haikun and asks if he wants to try, but the guy says that it will be okay. Little Zhenya pays attention to this and continues to eat the treats. But the young man then hands her a napkin and says that she is all dirty. The main character then thanks her brother, and she herself thinks how ashamed she is. A little later, music starts playing in the hall, and the main character thinks that it looks like it. It's time for the first dance. Today she's dancing for the first time at the ball. The little girl looks at her brother and thinks that this time he will never step on his foot. The guy tells her to calm down, because even if the baby steps on his foot, it still won't hurt him. And then these two begin to dance. The girl then turns to her brother and asks if today is also his first time dancing at the ball. Haikun replies that no, and the little girl says that for some reason she thought so. The young man asks why, and the girl says that the word, for the first time, does not suit him at all, because no matter what he does, he always answers that it is a mere trifle. Haikun then looks a little puzzled at the young lady and remains silent, and the girl just starts laughing. The guy then asks what's funny, and Dahlia claims that it's nothing, and she didn't think that it would be so fun to tease Haikun. But then, the guy feels the baby step on his leg, and their main character realizes this in shock, after which he asks for forgiveness, but the young man says that this is nothing, and then turns to the baby, and she says that she has an incredible talent for trampling other people's feet while dancing. Haikun in shock and thinks that she can't believe it because her brother just made a joke. But suddenly, the girl unintentionally steps on his foot again. When the dance ends, the young lady asks if she should call her brother a doctor, and the guy tells her not to talk nonsense. But then, someone approaches his lordship and claims that His Highness the Crown Prince has already arrived. Haikun then turns to his sister and says that they should greet him, and the little girl wonders if she will finally meet the Crown Prince. All the people come closer to the prince, and the little girl thinks that he turned 16 this year. And looking at the guy, he understands that this is the Crown Prince of the Empire, Leonard Ormus Mikhailio. Haikun approaches the prince and says that they have not seen each other for a long time. The guy replies that yes, and the Duke did a good job. The main character wonders whether it seems or, in reality, he looks much better than in the game. The guy apologizes for being so late because his partner turned out to be such a wonderful interlocutor that he didn't notice how time flew by. Haikun says that he is glad to hear this, and the little girl thinks that, judging by Adelicia's smile, she is enjoying the reception. The Crown Prince continues to carry on the conversation, and the main character thinks that these conversations are making her ears droop, and it looks like Leonard has no bones in his tongue. And besides, Dahlia never manages to congratulate him on his birthday. The young man claims that after all, Haikun is just something, and they are the same age as him, and he has already become a duke. Therefore, he cannot wait to receive the throne. The main character then thinks what a fool he is, because he seems to hope that his father will quickly fall into eternal sleep. And the prince then claims that he was babbling about something and asks them to enjoy the holiday. Dahlia then bows and thanks His Highness while the guy looks at her. She says that she is the same lady from the rumors. The main character thinks what he is talking about. And the guy then extends his hand and offers to try and continue to live an ordinary life since it has become so unusual. The baby then shakes his hand, and after the guy leaves, he says that they will see each other again. Adelicia comes up to Dahlia and says that among all today's authorities, there is no one who would be more beautiful than the girl. So she asks you to enjoy this wonderful event. Dahlia smiles sincerely in response to this. And the Crown Prince then asks when the next dance will start. The servant then claims that he can ask to start right now, and the guy says that it is wonderful, and then they will do so. After that, he invites Adelicia to dance. Then the girl replies that yes, and that sounds great. Well, when she leaves, she whispers that Dahlia hopes I forgot their promises and the next dance is hers. The main character then waves her hand to her maid of honor, and after that music begins to play in the hall. When Adelicia dances with the crown prince, she thinks that she is already sick of his stream of words, and Leonard suddenly says that he heard an interesting story, and they say that it's Heiken's sister, Lady Dahlia, has a special ability. The brunette asks what he is talking about, and she herself thinks whether the emperor told him, but the girl understands that his majesty would not do that. After which she asks what kind of ability this is, and the guy claims that the girl will be able to return distraught transcendence to normal. Adelicia then asks who told him about this, and the crown prince claims that it was Acarus. The woman then asks where he is now. The prince says that he does not know and must be somewhere in the palace. Adelicia then turns to His Highness and asks him to allow her to leave for a while after this dance. The girl understands that she must immediately find Acarus with her brother at this time, and the guy says that of course he foresaw this. But still, I didn't expect to be so tired. The baby just laughs awkwardly in response to this. And then she turns to her brother and says that she promised Adelicia the next dance, and the guy then says, okay, but asks if she should find a girl first. The baby then says yes. And after she's about to leave, Heiken says that after the dance, let Dahlia immediately return there, and the girl agrees, but thinks that only she needs to breathe some air first. After which, she goes out onto the balcony and thinks that she can finally film this road in this amazing thing. Standing on the balcony, the girl thinks that the wind is quite strong today. Well, then the little girl notices something moving on the tree and wonders if it's squirrels. But suddenly, the wind blows even stronger, and the baby immediately grabs her hair because it could be ruined. But after the wind ends, the little girl sees her bracelet already on one of the trees and realizes that she is in trouble. Dahlia thinks that she said that she would care for him and cherish him, so she needs to get him as soon as possible. But suddenly someone turns to the young lady and asks if it happened because of him. The baby then begins to look around and sees someone sitting on a tree. The second prince. The baby is a little embarrassed and thinks that it is Cedric. The blonde then asks if she wants to return this bracelet, because if so, he will help get it. But in return, he asks to keep their meeting secret. After which, the guy uses his magic, and with the help of it, gives the bracelet to the young lady and the baby. When they receive the jewelry back, thanks him. The baby then thinks that Cedric also has power, but then she turns to the guy and asks if he doesn't want to go inside. The young man then smiles and says that, to be honest, he doesn't really like the crowd, and the little girl then claims that since today is the crown prince's birthday, soon there should be a ball in his honor, but the guys claim that that's not going to happen because there is no one who would like to congratulate him. The baby then claims that this is quite sad to hear, after which silence hangs between them, and the girl thinks, how can he say such sad things so easily? But then Adelicia. He hears him speak and understands that this is all Adelicia's voice, and it seems that she is looking for Dahlia, but the girl thinks that, however, she hears another voice and thinks who she is with. But when the young lady is about to leave, someone turns to her. It turns out to be the second prince. He asks the young lady if her name is Dahlia, and after that he asks if she could be him a little longer. The main character, shocked by this, asks what he is talking about, but then feels like she is no longer standing on her feet. And the girl, being in the air, covers her mouth with her hands so that I scream too loudly. And after a little time, the girl already finds herself on a tree near the prince. The little girl thinks that the fire just happened. And when she reaches out her hand, she thinks that some kind of barrier surrounds her. The guy then says that now she can speak, but not too loudly, and the little girl asks why he did that. The blonde says that he doesn't know why, but just talking with her makes him feel happier. And after that, he points to the couple standing below. It turns out to be Adelicia and Acarus, and when the young lady sees them, he then asks what these two are doing. The prince then claims that it seems he has just discovered his weakness, and the main character thinks, what kind of face is this? Adelicia then asks how Atzeros knew about this, and the man replies that no matter how you look at it, it becomes obvious that it was Lady Dahlia who saved the Duchess of Bluefort. And even though he was not completely sure of this, thanks to Lady Adelicia, his guesses were confirmed. The main character then thinks in shock that they are talking about her, but the girl does not understand how Atzeres found out about this. The prince then says that this is what they are talking about, but asks what person they were talking about. The little girl just looks away and says who knows. And when after that he looks down again, he sees that Adelicia has returned back. But the girl thinks what Acarus was up to, because the salvation of the Duchess of Blufo was a miracle and not a manifestation of her own strength. While the little girl is thinking about this, the prince claims that he will probably go and then gives her a magic stone. The main character asks what it is, and the second prince claims that this is a stone that has magical powers, and if you break it, then the baby will immediately go down. The main character thanks the prince, and after that he disappears and the little girl thinks that he has disappeared. But then she looks at the crystal and wonders if it's warm because of magic. The young lady also thinks it's incredible. But then cracks begin to appear in the crystal, and when the young lady looks at her hand, she sees that the crystal is already completely broken. So the baby thinks whether it broke too easily. But then she remembers that if she breaks it, she will immediately go down. After which, the baby immediately begins to fly down. However, she understands that Acarus is there now, and she closes her eyes from the fear of what is now falling down. But the baby only slowly goes down with the help of magic, and then stands on her feet. Acarus then asks Lady Dahlia if this is it. But after that, only an awkward silence hangs between them. And Acarus looks at the young lady, after which he asks for forgiveness but claims that he seems to have forgotten to introduce himself. After which he turns to the respected Lady Dahlia and says that his name is Acarus, and he is also a devoted servant of the emperor. The baby asks if he knows her name. And the guy replies that her silver hair is so beautiful that once you see them, it is impossible to simply forget. The guy thinks that he is sure that the girl heard perfectly well what they were talking about with Adelicia. But this is not so important because now he has to check something. After which the young man turns to Lady Dahlia and says that if she doesn't mind, she asks if he can shake her hand. The main character asks in surprise if he wants to shake hands, and she herself thinks why in this world everyone loves these handshakes so much. After which she says that of course yes. And he shakes the guy's hand, and the young man then looks at his hand, and he is a little silent. The main character then asks if something is wrong, and the guy replies that no, and he just thought the girl was a very unusual person. But it seems he was wrong. The baby then asks what he's talking about, and she thinks that she doesn't understand what he's talking about, but she's still offended. Adelicia's voice, and when the girl asks if anyone has seen Dahlia Pisteros, the main character realizes that Adelicia seems to be looking for her, and Acarus then claims that they are only in the middle of their conversation, and the baby probably has a lot of questions for him. And the main character thinks that yes, and the man claims that it's written all over her face. The baby then claims that it's not, and then asks her to excuse her and tries to leave. But Acarus blocks her with his hand and asks if they could talk a little more. But the main character replies that no, and claims that she is asking him to get out of the way. The guy only smiles nervously in response to this, but then they hear someone's voice. Adelicia's voice, and the woman asks if Dahlia is there. Acarus then sighs and turns to Lady Dahlia. Then he asks to forgive him for his rudeness, and at the same moment he grabs the girl and then jumps with her over the balcony. The main character is shocked and thinks that they will fall, but this does not happen. And the guy just grabs the ledge in the building. He hears Adelicia coming, and the woman claims that she definitely heard the girl's voice. After that, she finds a hairpin on the floor and says that it belongs to Dahlia. The woman then screams for the roomers to immediately call Duke Pisteros. And Acarus thinks that he is doomed and all his plans are down the drain, after which he lets go of his hand and jumps on the ground with the young lady. Then the guy says who would have known that the girl would drop her hairpin. And this is incredible. But the main character thinks what he's talking about, and the guy says it like it's her fault. Acarus then turns to the young lady and says that if it turns out that he kidnapped her, then he will not avoid problems. But the little girl then asks why he did it, and the guy is silent for a while. He turns to Lady Dahlia and says that he will be honest. Then he claims that he actually has a plan. The main character asks if he is talking about the plan, and the guy replies that yes, and unfortunately he cannot share it with her right now. However, later she finds out about everything. Dahlia shudders at the fact that Acarus is approaching her so quickly. And then he turns to the guy and asks if he always keeps his plans secret. The guy says that he has been like this for as long as he can remember and he will not change. And the main character at this time thinks that this sounds very familiar. It seems to her that Adelicia is in the game I once told him that everything was okay and he could change. The girl whinnies, wishes that in the future they will be obsessed with each other. And now he claims that it seems like that because even people's tastes usually remain unchanged. And the young man says that apparently she does not intend to console him. But after that, he gets up and says that he thinks they should go back before they get caught. After which he leaves, and the main character at this time says that he will definitely become a bad person. The guy then turns around and asks what she is talking about, and the main character thinks that language is her enemy. Then the girl claims that this is nothing, and she thinks that they should. But suddenly, someone interrupts her and asks what they are doing there. The main character then turns around in shock, and he sees his brother, the guy, breathing heavily, asks what all this means. Dahlia wonders if this is Hakan, because if so, it seems Atsaras is in deep trouble. The brown-haired man immediately turns to Hakan and says that it's simple, but the young man does not let him finish and orders him to close his mouth. Atsaras then asks for forgiveness. Hakan turns to Dahlia and says that he is waiting for her explanation. The baby then claims that she simply accidentally dropped the bracelet he gave her. He fell from the balcony and got lost, and as a close associate of the Emperor, Mr. Acaris helped her find him. And the little girl says that she understands that she shouldn't have gone down there. Hakan only remains silent in response to all this, and then sighs. And he turns to Acaris. He claims that he thanks him for helping his sister and will definitely repay the debt. Asaras says that this is his responsibility and says that he is rejecting this. After this, the guy leaves and finally looks at the young lady. After the Emperor's close associate leaves, Hakan leans towards his sister. The baby apologizes for causing so much trouble, and Hakan, he says there is no need to apologize. However, he adds that Dahlia does not need to waste her energy looking for some trinkets. The baby only remains silent in response to this, and her brother then says that the ball is over and then offers to go home. But the little girl turns to him and then apologizes, and she claims that she cannot move. The girl grabs her leg and says that she thinks she has sprained her ankle, but then someone picks her up. It turns out to be Hakan. The little girl just notices that she smiles, and when the guy starts walking, then he hugs him and says that I'm really sorry. Hakan only claims that it is good that the girl realized her mistake. His Highness the Crown Prince is now claiming that the ball was going like clockwork until Lady Dahlia disappeared and everything went to hell. But today is his birthday, and the guy says that he thinks he will get another chance. After this, the young man notices that someone is standing near the carriage and sees that it is Lady Adelicia. The guy asks if something is wrong, and the girl replies that there is no and it's nothing, after which she turns to Sir Leonard. And he puts his hand on his leg. The guy shudders a little and, blushing, asks which one, and the brunette says that she hopes he will listen to her. Then he says that this concerns Lady Dahlia, with whom he spoke before the dance. And the girl asks if he could keep what happened a secret, because as Lady Dahlia's maid of honor, I wouldn't want rumors to float around, even if they are not truthful. This makes the guy a little more embarrassed and screams that, of course, since the girl wants it. The brunette then smiles and thanks him, and the guy then says that he hopes she doesn't mind having a cup of tea the next time they meet. At this time in the palace, Asaras collects his things and thinks that this is all, and then he should set off, but suddenly he hears someone's steps and turns around. But before he even has time to understand who it is, they immediately grab him by his clothes. It turns out to be Adelicia. She asks the guy what the hell he's doing because he's scurrying around like a rat. The young man, in response to this, only smiles and asks if something is wrong, because it seemed to him that the girl had settled down quite well as a countess, and asks if her old habits have returned, after which the young man asks if he is right, and addresses her as Countess Adelicia, and then asks whether he should better call her Estia. The woman is surprised by this. The guy just pushes her hand away, after which she claims that she seems to like living under a new guise, and then says that it's time for him to go, and maybe they will see each other again. Then the guy says goodbye, but Adelicia is not going to let him leave so easily, so she screams for him to wait and asks if the guy really thinks that she will let him leave so easily. The young man then snaps his fingers, after which an explosion is heard from behind. And when Adelicia turns around, she sees that a giant bird is already there. The guy heads out the window and then sits on a bird created with the help of magic, after which he sets off on it, and the brunette, left alone, bites her lip and hits her hand against the wall because she understands that she still missed him. Atsaras thinks that nothing special happened while shaking the girl's hand. However, when he stopped her from falling from the balcony, his mind began to clear up, and now he is confident that it was the girl who stopped the conversion of the Duchess of Bluefort, and one day Dahlia will become his. And then, using her holy power, the guy will awaken all the transcendents and drive them to madness, gradually pushing the Frederick Empire to the edge of the abyss. But then the guy grabs his heart. However, he hopes that he will soon be able to see the empire burn in flames. And after 3 years, he and the girl will meet again. After 3 years have passed. Then Dahlia, looking in the mirror, realizes that she has matured and is now 16 years old. The girl thinks that even though her peers are much taller than her, she will certainly grow up. A lot has changed over the past 3 years. Acarus became the pope of a neighboring country, and even though in the labyrinth of Ouroboros he was destined to become the pope of the Holy Empire, but now this happened earlier than in the game, and it seems that the appearance of a young lady in this world influenced the events. After all, according to the story, after Acarus became pope, he began to use holy power to heal people, and his mind began to rapidly collapse, but the girl understands that, unlike the original. Acarus is not very close and friendly with Adelicia, so the little girl doesn't think that there will soon be fights between them. At the same time, it is gradually growing in a couple of days. Hikon will turn 19, and the girl thinks that even though his strength has not changed at all, but in 3 years the guy became much more beautiful. The baby then looks at her brother, and he asks why she is staring at him. The girl says no, and she was just lost in thought. But the little girl with a smile on her face hopes that Hikon will remain like this forever. A short time later, while in the garden, the little girl asks what she should give her brother this year. And Adelicia believes that if the gift comes from Dahlia, he will be happy with anything. The baby says that her friend is probably right, and the girl then asks if it turns out that Dahlia wants to see his surprised face. The little girl eats dessert and thinks how delicious it is, and then says that she is worried. After this, the girl says that's great, and then she'll go shopping tomorrow. The next day, the girl is ready and thinks that today she will spend her pocket money, after which she turns to her nanny and tells her to be picked up in 3 hours. The girl thinks that her first gift will be a fountain pen. After all, if her brother has a beautiful and comfortable hand, then it will be easier to work with. After this, the little girl enters the store and says that she came to buy a gift for her brother. The man asks what she is looking for. The girl says that it is something easy to use, but at the same time sophisticated. The salesman then bends down under the counter and asks the lady to wait a little because it's there somewhere. Well, then someone approaches from behind and asks if the girl is looking for a gift for Hikon. And the main character thinks what a familiar voice this is, and when she turns around, then he sees a brunette. The little girl is immediately surprised and thinks that dark hair and ordinary clothes look inconspicuous. But this face is exactly the same as the emperor's. The baby is then about to cry out to His Majesty, but the guy just tells her to be quiet. The salesman rises from behind the counter and asks if the lady was talking about something, and the little girl replies that no, and she didn't say anything. And after that, he turns to the seller and asks if he could wrap that pen for him. The man says yes, and of course, and then asks him to wait. The emperor then turns to the girl and says that let this be his gift for Hikon, and the girl thinks that perhaps she should yield to His Majesty, and then she thanks him, and the guy says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. Legs, the young lady just asks what brought him there. The emperor then claims that he was actually looking for the escaped Cedric. And then I saw her in the store and couldn't resist, but the main character asks why he came to her. And the guy asks why she didn't visit him for a whole year. The little girl asks in shock what he's talking about and thinks there's nothing he should do. And the guy says that he was waiting for her and even personally checked every letter. But the girl did not send him a single message. But the girl then asks how she can disturb His Majesty. However, the guy says that not a word more, because of course she can. After which the man turns to the young lady and asks if it turns out that she never bought anything for Hikon, after which the emperor says that he will help, and the girl then takes his hand and thanks him. The nanny, who stays away so as not to disturb them, only excitedly addresses the lady. After this, the baby goes to see His Highness, and he asks if she has already decided on another gift. The little girl says that maybe it's worth picking up some clothes, and the emperor claims that he wouldn't recommend visiting the atelier, because even though you can't tell from Hikon, he has excellent taste in clothes. So it's unlikely that he would be pleased with something like this, and even if he wore her gift every day, he would definitely be shedding tears inside. The main character then seems wounded by these words and says that last year she gave him cufflinks, and she thought that she liked them since the guy always wore them, but that's how it turns out. The emperor then claims that he liked them so that the little girl need not worry. The main character then asks if this is true, and His Highness answers yes. And the little girl then wants to offer something, but the emperor replies that it's better not to. after which the girl begins to think. And then he asks what about the music box, but the emperor says that if her voice can be heard from it, then okay. Dahlia Zhenya thinks that she is giving up and this is too much, after which she offers many more options, but His Highness rejects each of them. And the little girl, all exhausted, thinks that it seems her idea was destroyed to smithereens. But then she sees an advertisement for a gramophone near her and asks what about it. The emperor then looks at this advertisement and thinks that this might be a good fit. The little girl is happy about this, and the emperor adds that in the end, Hikan loves music, but it's kind of expensive. The main character then really understands that she will not have enough money, and the emperor at this time asks how much she has with her. The girl then opens the bag with her money and shows it to the emperor, after which the two of them already look at this wallet, and then the emperor claims that perhaps this is enough to buy a good model. The little girl then, in shock, asks if this is true and then says that she is buying, and the man says that it's nice and then he will take her to a certain store. After that, they head to the store, and the girl thinks that she is sincerely grateful that His Majesty went with her and wasted his time. But he even sent Darlene away. But the girl thinks nothing, just that he spends so much time in her. But then they approach the store and the man claims it's there. The little girl immediately goes to the window and says that there are so many gramophones there, after which she turns to His Majesty and thanks him for help in choosing a gift. The girl once again claims that she is sincerely grateful to him for this, and His Majesty smiles and says that she is so polite. However, even a simple walk with her makes him happy. That's why he asks the little girl to visit him in the imperial palace more often. After that, they enter the store and the seller greets them and then asks what they want. The emperor immediately pushes him into another room and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time, but the thing that he bought from them last time turned out to be excellent. The main character does not understand what is happening and then approaches one of the gramophones and examines it. A short time later, the seller leaves this room and asks for forgiveness for the wait. The girl says that this is nothing, and the seller then asks what she wants to buy. The little girl says that she wants to buy a gift for her brother and asks him to recommend their best product to her. The guy then points to one of the gramophones and claims that it is their new product called Maytel Blue, and he is the latest edition. The little girl then asks how much it costs, and the seller says that 490 dillons. The main character understands that 1 dillon in this world is equal to about 2,001, and it turns out that he is worth 1,000,001. The young lady thinks that it is much cheaper than she expected, and besides, she took exactly enough with her. Therefore, the little girl, looking at the gramophone, tells him to be kind and pack it, and the man then asks where to deliver it. The little one tells him to deliver it to the estate of Duke Pesteros, and the seller then hands over the receipt and asks the girl to sign. The little girl looks at her and asks why it's covered in black. The man claims that this item is now on sale because he has reduced the price. And the girl signs the man and thinks who is selling the new product at a discount, after which the man thanks her for the purchase and says that he will soon send it to the concept. After Dahlia and the emperor go outside, he claims that since they finally bought a gift for Hikan, then he should accompany her home. The main character then smiles and agrees, saying that otherwise she will also receive a scolding for being late. A little time later, when they are already getting out of the carriage, the man asks if Dahlia had fun today. The girl replies that of course, and the emperor then says that since she had a good time, can she fulfill his wish? The girl only smiles in response to this. And then he hugs the blonde. This also makes the guy smile sincerely, but then someone grunts with displeasure. This turns out to be the brother of the main character, and he turns to His Majesty. The blonde then asks how long the guy has been here, and whether he thinks that he is overprotective of his sister. Hikan just takes the girl by the hand and pulls her towards him, after which he claims that it's none of his business. He thanks the emperor for escorting his sister home, but claims that it is time for him to return. The blonde claims that he was about to leave anyway, after which he says goodbye to Lady Dahlia and the little girl thanks him for his help. When the emperor leaves, Hikan extends his hand to his sister, and the little girl takes it with a smile on her face. The guy asks where his sister went with His Majesty, and the girl replies that she was shopping and they looked at a couple of things. And the next day, the young lady found out that the gramophone, whose true price was 5,000 dillons, was worth much more than she paid for it. A short time later, the gramophone was already in the Duke's room, and the guy, looking at him, only remained silent, and the main character stood next to her brother, also silent a little, and then claims that just recently she spoke with His Majesty, and it looks like he paid for most of the purchase, but he tells her not to worry, because despite His Majesty's help, this is her gift to him. The little girl is in shock, wondering if he agrees with this, and the guy just puts his hand on her head, and he says that he has long dreamed of something like this, so he thanks the baby. The main character thinks that they always celebrate Hikan's birthday together, and this time she successfully organized the holiday again, and the girl hopes that these happy days will last forever. Well, that same evening, being in her bed and looking at the stars, the little girl thinks that at least this is impossible. Hikan had not yet been able to fully awaken his power, and unlike his predecessor, he needed more time. Therefore, the emperor claims that he thinks this will happen at the end of the year, and his awakening will mark the beginning of self-destruction. The baby just looks sadly at the floor, and the man says, "I'm not worried." Transcendent goes through this, and if he comes to his senses, then let her resort to him because he will save her. The main character then thanks His Majesty with a smile on her face, and the man looks out the window and says that a little later the power of Lady Dahlia will awaken. The baby then asks what he is talking about, and the emperor turns to her and says that it is nothing. Therefore, now the young lady thinks that he is definitely hiding something. After which the little girl sighs and thinks that this year the powers of Hikan will finally awaken. The guy, sitting in his room, fills out one of the documents, but suddenly his hands begin to shake, and the young man understands that it seems that the flows of magic in his body have raged, after which he squeezes his hand and thinks that there is not much left. The guy turns to Sebastian and asks where the documents he asked for are. Well, the butler says they're not ready yet. Hikan then asks what he is talking about, and the man claims that the documents of the Duchy of Pesteros, which are associated with the awakening of the power of transcendence. They were lost in a fire when one of the previous dukes of Pesteros went mad. The guy then claims that nothing can be done, and he understands. And he thinks that it's so annoying that he has to ask about it. Well, the next day, he received a response from the emperor which said that he was very busy, so let the duke sort it out himself. The young man squeezed this paper and immediately threw it out the window. The butler asks if everything is okay. The duke says that it's nothing, after which he claims that he will give him some instructions. Just let Sebastian not tell anyone. A little while later, while the gardener is working in the garden, he hears the sounds of a gramophone. And the maids also hear this. They turn to the lady and tell her to stop the duke because the music plays day and night and they cannot sleep. Another maid says that she already dreams about this gramophone in her nightmares. The main character then apologizes and claims that she will talk to him. But the girl thinks that if at least something doesn't distract him, the guy will simply go crazy, and the young lady then tells the maids to stay away from her brother for now. The little girl thinks that fortunately they allowed her to turn off the gramophone, but Hikan was getting worse day by day, and because she was afraid that the guy might do something to the servants, who never left him for a minute. Now the young man turns to Sebastian and asks if he doesn't see that these documents are in perfect order. The man apologizes, and Hikan then I don't ask you how much longer he has to repeat, so that it finally dawns on him, after which he screams that this is already the third time. This makes the young lady a little scared, and then Hikan, seeing this, calms down and tells the servant to get out. The baby remembers how the emperor gave her one piece of advice. He told her that the baby should hug Hikan with all her love, and then everything would work out. After all, do not underestimate the great power of love. Therefore, now the baby, looking at her brother, is thinking about hugs. The girl is not sure that this will work, but she still reaches out her hand to him. But her brother then claims that she would not touch him. The young man says that he can hurt her, after which he goes back to his place, and the little girl apologizes. A little later, the girl asks the butler how her brother is feeling, and the man claims that the gentleman has a severe headache, so he is resting in his chambers. The baby asks the butler to look after her brother, and she speaks that she will go to the palace for now. Dahlia understands that she needs to meet with the emperor, and a little time later, while in the palace, someone informs His Highness that Lady Dahlia wants to see him. The emperor, then signing one of the documents, tells the young lady that he is glad to meet you. The man apologizes, but says that he is now dealing with important matters, and the little girl thinks that it's probably all about the empire in which Atzerus became pope. His Majesty then asks if the girl really came there, due to the awakening of Hikan. The main character then replies that yes, and the emperor asks how he is doing. The baby then claims that his actions and words have become ruder than usual. And His Majesty says that there are 3 stages of awakening the power, preparing to blossom and calm down. During the first stage, transcendents are the most sensitive and cruel, and it lasts approximately 3 weeks. However, when they reach the flowering stage, they completely lose their minds and begin to destroy everything around them. This stage lasts about a week, and after that they finally calm down. Calm. The main character then begins to count when Hikon began to behave strangely. But then the baby realizes in shock that it's already been more than 2 weeks, and it turns out that the guy is already entering the flowering stage. The emperor turns to the young lady and says that it turns out she never took his advice. And the girl asks what he is talking about. And the man then extends his hands and claims that he is talking about hugs. The baby then claims that everything is not so simple. And the emperor asks why, and the young lady then says that she has already tried. But Hikon does not let her near him. The blonde then says that he understands, and then all they have to do is lure him into a trap. After which he turns to Alfred and says to tell Lady Dahlia this. The guy obeys the master. And then the young lady is given instructions on how to minimize damage during the blooming period of the transcendent. Firstly, you need to hide all sharp objects, and secondly, do not allow ordinary people to stay near the transcendent. Thirdly, the transcendent must be looked after by another transcendent. Fourthly, you need to stock up on food and water for use, and also lock the transcendental in a separate room. The room must be enchanted so that mere mortals cannot penetrate it, and 2 transcendents must be located outside the room in anticipation of calm. The little girl thinks, why should they treat a person like a wild animal, and tells the emperor that she cannot do this to her brother in the evening. Locking him up for a week is too much. But His Majesty claims that now is not the time for sentimentality and says that just in case, he will give her the magic scroll. Pesteros becomes the head of the duchy within a month. The man says that Hikon will not be able to perform his duties anyway. And to begin with, the girl should believe the rumors of leaving the estate and then transporting all the necessary documents to another place. And the manager of their estate is a worthy man, so the girl can leave it to him. The main character then thanks the emperor, and he says that since she took up this matter, he is sure that everything will be all right. And then the man claims that no matter what happens, the girl can always come to him. Then the main character goes home and looks at the magic scroll, but then she is greeted by the butler. The baby then asks Sebastian if her brother is okay, and the man replies that yes, and while she was away, everything was calm. The girl then hands the servant the paper and says that His Majesty gave it to her. The man looks at the documents, and the little girl says that she thinks first they need to transfer all the important documents to another place, and asks if Sebastian can do this, and also organize a month's vacation for everyone. And even to herself, the girl claims that she trusts him. The butler then says that the Herzog had already given similar orders earlier, and the main character asks if this is true, because if so, what a relief it is. And the man then turns to the lady and says that the Duke also has something like her scroll. So it looks like he's predicted all the possible outcomes, but the manager says he feels bad about putting all this on the young lady's shoulders. The baby then claims that everything is in order, and after all, she is also a Pesteros, so it is her duty. The manager then says that the previous Duke and the current one never explained to him how to deal with such situations, and even the previous Duchess. That she hated the young master so much, but now he has Lady Dahlia, and this is true happiness. The main character then asks if her brother is still resting, and the butler then says that he believes so. The baby then runs to her brother's room and tells him to do everything she told him for now, because they know when the brother will move to the second stage. The next morning, the guy wakes up in his bed and wonders how long he slept. But the young man feels as if his head is about to explode, and he thinks that the estate is so quiet. But suddenly the guy feels like his body is on fire and the power is seething in him. Hikon assures himself that he can handle this like his family, suffering alone and trembling with fear, but then the guy heard a voice asking if he had forgotten what he had done, and then asks how long Dahlia Pesteros will be by his side. Hikon then just grabs the vase from the chest of drawers and screams for this voice to shut up, after which he throws this vase into the wall. But then the guy thinks he's really thirsty and reaches for the bell, after which the young man rings it several times, but still no one comes, and he throws the bell to the ground, asking how long he should wait. However, a little time later he sees the doors to his room open and cries out whether the servants have just arrived. However, it turns out to be a young lady, and the guy calms down a little. He asks Dahlia in shock if it is, and the little girl asks her brother if he woke up and then pours water into a glass. The young man asks what she is doing, and the little girl replies that from now on, she will take care of him. Hikan then asks if she will take care of him, and then immediately bursts into the corridor and looks into him. He sees that there are no servants left there. The main character then turns to her brother and says that she has sent all the servants of the estate on vacation, and now they are the only ones left there. The young man asks what she is talking about and whose order it was, because the only one who can order such a thing. But the little girl interrupts her brother and says that it was his order. The guy then puts his hand on his head and says that it's true, after which he turns around and leaves. The main character tries to touch her brother, but he only pushes her hand away and then claims that he is still sane, and therefore he can cope perfectly well on his own. So let the girl be swept out of the estate like the rest. The little girl screams that she cannot leave him alone. And the voice in the Duke's head says that she is a liar and asks how long the girl will remain on his side. The guy says that this is enough and he needs to work because his head is a complete mess. The main character then thinks what to do but realizes that in any case, she has a scroll. However, when the little girl takes this flower out of her sleeve, she sees that it is no longer suitable and the girl thinks that it's all over. The little girl wonders if Haikon is really that strong, but its flowering period has not yet ended. But the little girl remembers how the butler claimed that the Duke had something similar, and the little girl understands that if he opens the doors and leaves the estate, everything will be bad. Well, then she squeezes a piece of paper and thinks that she definitely won't allow this, after which the baby goes to the office. However, then she hears her brother screaming who dared to do these papers without him, and when the room becomes quiet, the main character wonders if he has calmed down. The little girl understands that she shouldn't worry and just go in and then pick up the scroll. But when the girl opens the door, an explosion immediately occurs. And when she looks at her brother, she sees that he is no longer himself. The young lady wonders if the flowering stage has ended, after which she turns around in shock and wonders where the scroll is. However, a little time later, the young lady sees it already torn on the ground and thinks that this cannot be true. Hikan is already heading towards her at this time. The baby is very scared by this, but suddenly someone else appears in the room.